A Merry Christmas from Little Women Joe was the first to wake in the gray dawn of Christmas morning. No stockings hung at the fireplace, and for a moment she felt as much disappointment as she did long ago, when her little sock fell down because it was so crammed with goodies. Then she remembered her mother's promise, and slipping her hand under her pillow, drew out a little crimson-covered book. She knew it very well, for it was that beautiful old story of the best life ever lived, and Joe felt that it was a true guidebook for any pilgrim going the long journey. She woke Meg with a Merry Christmas and bade her see what was under her pillow. A green-covered book appeared with the same picture inside, and a few words written by their mother, which made their one present very precious in their eyes. Presently Bet and Amy woke, to rummage and find their little books, also one dove-colored, the other blue, and all sat looking at and talking about them, while the east grew rosy with the coming day. In spite of her small vanities, Margaret had a sweet and pious nature, which unconsciously influenced her sisters, especially Joe, who loved her very tenderly, and obeyed her because her advice was so gently given. "Girls," said Meg seriously, looking from the tumbled head beside her to the two little night-capped ones in the room beyond, "Mother wants us to read and love and mind these books, and we must begin at once. We used to be faithful about it, but since Father went away and all this war trouble unsettled us, we have neglected many things. You can do as you please, but I shall keep my book on the table here and read a little every morning as soon as I wake, for I know it will do me good and help me through the day." Then she opened her new book and began to read. Joe put her arm around her and, leaning cheek to cheek, read also with the quiet expression so seldom seen on her restless face. "How good Meg is! Come, Amy, let's do as they do. I'll help you with the hard words and they'll explain things if we don't understand," whispered Bet, very much impressed by the pretty books and her sister's example. "I'm glad mine is blue," said Amy, and then the rooms were very still while the pages were softly turned, and the winter sunshine crept in to touch the bright heads and serious faces with a Christmas greeting. "Where is Mother?" asked Meg, as she and Joe ran down to thank her for their gifts half an hour later. "Goodness only knows. Some poor creetur come beggin', and your ma went straight off to see what was needed. There never was such a woman for givin' away victuals and drink, clothes and fearin'," replied Hannah, who had lived with the family since Meg was born, and was considered by them all more as a friend than a servant. "She will be back soon, I guess. So do your cakes and have everything ready," said Meg, looking over the presents which were collected in a basket and kept under the sofa, ready to be produced at the proper time. "Why, where is Amy's bottle of cologne?" she added, as the little flask did not appear. "She took it out a minute ago and went off with it to put a ribbon on it or some such notion," replied Joe, dancing about the room to take the first stiffness off the new army slippers. "How nice my handkerchiefs look, don't they? Hannah washed and ironed them for me, and I marked them all myself," said Bet, looking proudly at the somewhat uneven letters which had cost her such labor. "Bless the child, she's gone and put Mother on them instead of M. March. How funny!" cried Joe, taking up one. "Isn't it right? I thought it was better to do it so because Meg's initials are M.M., and I don't want anyone to use these but Marmee," said Bet, looking troubled. "It's all right, dear, and a very pretty idea, quite sensible too, for no one can ever mistake now. It will please her very much, I know," said Meg, with a frown for Joe and a smile for Bet. "There's Mother, hide the basket, quick," cried Joe, as a door slammed and steps sounded in the hall. Amy came in hastily and looked rather abashed when she saw her sisters all waiting for her. "Where have you been, and what are you hiding behind you?" asked Meg, surprised to see, by her hood and cloak, that lazy Amy had been out so early. "Don't laugh at me, Joe. I didn't mean anyone should know till the time came. I only meant to change the little bottle for a big one, and I gave all my money to get it, and I'm truly trying not to be selfish anymore." As she spoke, Amy showed the handsome flask which replaced the cheap one, and looked so earnest and humble in her little effort to forget herself that Meg hugged her on the spot, and Joe pronounced her a trump, while Bate ran to the window and picked her finest rose to ornament the stately bottle. "You see, I felt ashamed of my present after reading and talking about being good this morning, so I ran round the corner and changed it the minute I was up. And I'm so glad, for mine is the handsomest now." Another bang of the street door sent the basket under the sofa and the girls to the table eager for breakfast. "Merry Christmas, Marmee. Lots of them. Thank you for our books. We read some, and mean to every day," they cried in chorus. "Merry Christmas, little daughters. I'm glad you began at once and hope you will keep on. But I want to say one word before we sit down. Not far away from here lies a poor woman with a little newborn baby. 6 children are huddled into one bed to keep from freezing, for they have no fire. There is nothing to eat over there, and the oldest boy came to tell me they were suffering hunger and cold. My girls, will you give them your breakfast as a Christmas present?" They were all unusually hungry, having waited nearly an hour, and for a minute no one spoke. Only a minute, for Joe exclaimed impetuously, "I'm so glad you came before we began. May I go and help carry the things to the poor little children?" asked Bate eagerly. "I shall take the cream and the muffins," added Amy, heroically giving up the articles she most liked. Meg was already covering the buckwheats and piling the bread into one big plate. "I thought you'd do it," said Mrs. March, smiling as if satisfied. "You shall all go and help me, and when we come back we will have bread and milk for breakfast and make it up at dinner time." They were soon ready, and the procession set out. Fortunately it was early and they went through back streets. So few people saw them and no one laughed at the funny party. A poor, bare, miserable room it was, with broken windows, no fire, ragged bedclothes, a sick mother, wailing baby, and a group of pale, hungry children cuddled under one old quilt, trying to keep warm. How the big eyes stared and the blue lips smiled as the girls went in. "Ach, mein Gott, it is good angels come to us," cried the poor woman, crying for joy. "Funny angels in hoods and mittens," said Joe, and set them laughing. In a few minutes it really did seem as if kind spirits had been at work there. Hannah, who had carried wood, made a fire and stopped up the broken panes with old hats and her own shawl. Mrs. March gave the mother tea and gruel, and comforted her with promises of help, while she dressed the little baby as tenderly as if it had been her own. The girls, meantime, spread the table, set the children round the fire, and fed them like so many hungry birds, laughing, talking, and trying to understand the funny broken English. "Das ist gut. Der Angel kinder," cried the poor things, as they ate and warmed their purple hands at the comfortable blaze. The girls had never been called angel children before, and thought it very agreeable, especially Joe, who had been considered a Sancho ever since she was born. That was a very happy breakfast, though they didn't get any of it, and when they went away, leaving comfort behind, I think there were not in all the city 4 merrier people than the hungry little girls who gave away their breakfasts, and contented themselves with bread and milk on Christmas morning. "That's loving our neighbor better than ourselves, and I like it," said Meg, as they set out their presents, while their mother was upstairs collecting clothes for the poor Hummels. Not a very splendid show, but there was a great deal of love done up in the few little bundles, and the tall vase of red roses, white chrysanthemums, and trailing vines which stood in the middle gave quite an elegant air to the table. "She's coming. Strike up, Bate, open the door, Amy. 3 cheers for Marmee," cried Joe, prancing about, while Meg went to conduct Mother to the seat of honor. Bate played her gayest march, Amy threw open the door, and Meg enacted escort with great dignity. Mrs. March was both surprised and touched, and smiled with her eyes full as she examined her presents and read the little notes which accompanied them. The slippers went on at once. A new handkerchief was slipped into her pocket, well scented with Amy's cologne. The rose was fastened in her bosom, and the nice gloves were pronounced a perfect fit. There was a good deal of laughing and kissing and explaining, in the simple loving fashion which makes these home festivals so pleasant at the time, so sweet to remember long afterward, and then all fell to work. The morning charities and ceremonies took so much time that the rest of the day was devoted to preparations for the evening festivities. Being still too young to go often to the theater, and not rich enough to afford any great outlay for private performances, the girls put their wits to work, and necessity being the mother of invention, made whatever they needed. Very clever were some of their productions: pasteboard guitars, antique lamps made of old-fashioned butter boats covered with silver paper, gorgeous robes of old cotton glittering with tin spangles from a pickle factory, and armor covered with the same useful diamond-shaped bits left in sheets when the lids of tin preserve pots were cut out. The furniture was used to being turned into topsy-turvy, and the big chamber was the scene of many innocent revels. No gentlemen were admitted, so Jo played male parts to her heart's content and took immense satisfaction in a pair of russet leather boots given her by a friend who knew a lady who knew an actor. These boots, an old foil and a slashed doublet once used by an artist for some picture, were Jo's chief treasures, and appeared on all occasions. The smallness of the company made it necessary for the two principal actors to take several parts apiece, and they certainly deserved some credit for the hard work they did in learning 3 or 4 different parts, whisking in and out of various costumes, and managing the stage besides. It was excellent drill for their memories, a harmless amusement, and employed many hours which otherwise would have been idle, lonely, or spent in less profitable society. On Christmas night, a dozen girls piled on to the bed, which was the dress circle, and sat before the blue and yellow chintz curtains in a most flattering state of expectancy. There was a good deal of rustling and whispering behind the curtain, a trifle of lamp smoke, and an occasional giggle from Amy, who was apt to get hysterical in the excitement of the moment. Presently a bell sounded, the curtains flew apart, and the operatic tragedy began. A gloomy wood, according to the one playbill, was represented by a few shrubs in pots, a green baize on the floor, and a cave in the distance. This cave was made with a clothes horse for a roof, bureaus for walls, and in it was a small furnace in full blast, with a black pot on it and an old witch bending over it. The stage was dark, and the glow of the furnace had a fine effect, especially as real steam issued from the kettle when the witch took off the cover. A moment was allowed for the first thrill to subside. Then Hugo, the villain, stalked in with a clanking sword at his side, a slouched hat, black beard, mysterious cloak, and the boots. After pacing to and fro in much agitation, he struck his forehead and burst out in a wild strain, singing of his hatred to Rodrigo, his love for Zara, and his pleasing resolution to kill the one and win the other. The gruff tones of Hugo's voice, with an occasional shout when his feelings overcame him, were very impressive, and the audience applauded the moment he paused for breath. Bowing with the air of one accustomed to public praise, he stole to the cavern and ordered Hagar to come forth with a commanding, "What ho, minion, I need thee." Out came Meg, with gray horsehair hanging about her face, a red and black robe, a staff, and cabalistic signs upon her cloak. Hugo demanded a potion to make Zara adore him, and one to destroy Rodrigo. Hagar, in a fine dramatic melody, promised both, and proceeded to call up the spirit who would bring the love philtre. "Hither, hither from thy home, airy sprite, I bid thee come. Born of roses, fed on dew, charms and potions canst thou brew. Bring me here with elfin speed the fragrant philtre which I need. Make it sweet and swift and strong. Spirit, answer now my song." A soft strain of music sounded, and then at the back of the cave appeared a little figure in cloudy white, with glittering wings, golden hair, and a garland of roses on its head. Waving a wand, it sung, "Hither I come from my airy home afar in the silver moon. Take the magic spell, oh, use it well, or its power will vanish soon." And dropping a small gilded bottle at the witch's feet, the spirit vanished. Another chant from Hagar produced another apparition, not a lovely one, for, with a bang, an ugly black imp appeared, and having croaked a reply, tossed a dark bottle at Hugo and disappeared with a mocking laugh. Having warbled his thanks and put the potions in his boots, Hugo departed, and Hagar informed the audience that, as he had killed a few of her friends in times past, she has cursed him, and intends to thwart his plans and be revenged on him. Then the curtain fell, and the audience reposed and ate candy while discussing the merits of the play. A good deal of hammering went on before the curtain rose again, but when it became evident what a masterpiece of stage carpentering had been got up, no one murmured at the delay. It was truly superb. A tower rose to the ceiling. Halfway up appeared a window with a lamp burning at it, and behind the white curtain appeared Zara in a lovely blue and silver dress, waiting for Rodrigo. He came in gorgeous array, with plumed cap, red cloak, chestnut lovelocks, a guitar, and the boots, of course. Kneeling at the foot of the tower, he sung a serenade in melting tones. Zara replied, and after a musical dialogue consented to fly. Then came the grand effect of the play. Rodrigo produced a rope ladder with 5 steps to it, threw up one end, and invited Zara to descend. Timidly she crept from her lattice, put her hand on Rodrigo's shoulder, and was about to leap gracefully down, when, alas, alas for Zara! She forgot her train. It caught in the window. The tower tottered, leaned forward, fell with a crash, and buried the unhappy lovers in the ruins. A universal shriek arose as the russet boots waved wildly from the wreck, and a golden head emerged, exclaiming, "I told you so! I told you so!" With wonderful presence of mind, Don Pedro, the cruel sire, rushed in, dragged out his daughter with a hasty aside, "Don't laugh, act as if it was all right," and ordering Rodrigo up, banished him from the kingdom with wrath and scorn. Though decidedly shaken by the fall of the tower upon him, Rodrigo defied the old gentleman and refused to stir. This dauntless example fired Zara. She also defied her sire, and he ordered them both to the deepest dungeons of the castle. A stout little retainer came in with chains and led them away, looking very much frightened and evidently forgetting the speech he ought to have made. Act Third was the castle hall, and here Hagar appeared, having come to free the lovers and finish Hugo. She hears him coming and hides, sees him put the potions into 2 cups of wine and bid the timid little servant bear them to the captives in their cells and tell them, "I shall come anon." The servant takes Hugo aside to tell him something, and Hagar changes the cups for 2 others which are harmless. Ferdinando, the minion, carries them away, and Hagar puts back the cup which holds the poison meant for Rodrigo. Hugo, getting thirsty after a long warble, drinks it, loses his wits, and after a good deal of clutching and stamping, falls flat and dies, while Hagar informs him what she has done in a song of exquisite power and melody. This was a truly thrilling scene, though some persons might have thought that the sudden tumbling down of a quantity of long hair rather marred the effect of the villain's death. He was called before the curtain, and with great propriety appeared leading Hagar, whose singing was considered more wonderful than all the rest of the performance put together. Act Fourth displayed the despairing Rodrigo on the point of stabbing himself, because he has been told that Zara has deserted him. Just as the dagger is at his heart, a lovely song is sung under his window, informing him that Zara is true, but in danger, and he can save her if he will. A key is thrown in which unlocks the door, and in a spasm of rapture he tears off his chains and rushes away to find and rescue his lady-love. Act Fifth opened with a stormy scene between Zara and Don Pedro. He wishes her to go into a convent, but she won't hear of it, and after a touching appeal is about to faint, when Rodrigo dashes in and demands her hand. Don Pedro refuses because he is not rich. They shout and gesticulate tremendously, but cannot agree, and Rodrigo is about to bear away the exhausted Zara, when the timid servant enters with a letter and a bag from Hagar, who has mysteriously disappeared. The letter informs the party that she bequeaths untold wealth to the young pair, and an awful doom to Don Pedro if he doesn't make them happy. The bag is opened, and several quarts of tin money shower down upon the stage, till it is quite glorified with the glitter. This entirely softens the stern sire. He consents without a murmur. All join in a joyful chorus, and the curtain falls upon the lovers kneeling to receive Don Pedro's blessing, in attitudes of the most romantic grace. Tumultuous applause followed, but received an unexpected check, for the cot-bed on which the dress circle was built suddenly shut up and extinguished the enthusiastic audience. Rodrigo and Don Pedro flew to the rescue, and all were taken out unhurt, though many were speechless with laughter. The excitement had hardly subsided when Hannah appeared, with Mrs. March's compliments, and would the ladies walk down to supper. This was a surprise, even to the actors, and when they saw the table they looked at one another in rapturous amazement. It was like Marmee to get up a little treat for them, but anything so fine as this was unheard of since the departed days of plenty. There was ice cream, actually 2 dishes of it, pink and white, and cake and fruit and distracting French bonbons, and in the middle of the table 4 great bouquets of hothouse flowers. It quite took their breath away, and they stared first at the table and then at their mother, who looked as if she enjoyed it immensely. "Is it fairies?" asked Amy. "It's Santa Claus," said Bate. Mother did it, and Meg smiled her sweetest in spite of her gray beard and white eyebrows. "Aunt March had a good fit and sent the supper," cried Joe with a sudden inspiration. "All wrong. Old Mr. Lawrence sent it," replied Mrs. March. "The Lawrence boy's grandfather." "What in the world put such a thing into his head?" "We don't know him," exclaimed Meg. "Hannah told one of his servants about your breakfast party. He is an odd old gentleman, but that pleased him. He knew my father years ago, and he sent me a polite note this afternoon, saying he hoped I would allow him to express his friendly feeling toward my children by sending them a few trifles in honor of the day. I could not refuse, and so you have a little feast at night to make up for the bread and milk breakfast. That boy put it into his head. I know he did. He's a capital fellow, and I wish we could get acquainted. He looks as if he'd like to know us, but he's bashful, and Meg is so prim she won't let me speak to him when we pass," said Joe, as the plates went round and the ice began to melt out of sight with ohs and ahs of satisfaction. "You mean the people who live in the big house next door, don't you?" asked one of the girls. "My mother knows old Mr. Lawrence, but says he's very proud and doesn't like to mix with his neighbors. He keeps his grandson shut up when he isn't riding or walking with his tutor, and makes him study dreadful hard. We invited him to our party, but he didn't come. Mother says he's very nice, though he never speaks to us girls. Our cat ran away once, and he brought her back, and we talked over the fence and were getting on capitally, all about cricket and so on, when he saw Meg coming and walked off. I mean to know him some day, for he needs fun, I'm sure he does," said Joe decidedly. "I like his manners, and he looks like a little gentleman, so I've no objection to your knowing him if a proper opportunity comes. He brought the flowers himself, and I should have asked him in if I had been sure what was going on upstairs. He looked so wistful as he went away, hearing the frolic and evidently having none of his own." "It's a mercy you didn't, Mother," laughed Joe, looking at her boots. "But we'll have another play sometime that he can see. Maybe he'll help act. Wouldn't that be jolly? I never had a bouquet before. How pretty it is," and Meg examined her flowers with great interest. "They are lovely, but Bates roses are sweeter to me," said Mrs. March, sniffing at the half-dead posy in her belt. Bate nestled up to her and whispered softly, I wish I could send my bunch to Father. I'm afraid he isn't having such a Merry Christmas as we are. Kate's Choice WL, what do you think of her? I think she's a perfect dear and not a bit stuck up with all her money. A real little lady and ever so pretty. She kissed me lots, and she doesn't tell me to run away, so I love her. The group of brothers and sisters standing round the fire laughed as little May finished the chorus of praise with these crowning virtues. Tall Kent had asked the question, and seemed satisfied with the general approval of the new cousin who had just arrived from England to live with them. They had often heard of Kate and rather prided themselves on the fact that she lived in a fine house, was very rich, and sent them charming presents. Now pity was added to the pride, for Kate was an orphan and all her money could not buy back the parents she had lost. They had watched impatiently for her arrival, had welcomed her cordially, and after a day spent in trying to make her feel at home, they were comparing notes in the twilight, while Kate was having a quiet talk with Mama. I hope she will choose to live with us. You know she can go to any of the uncles she likes best, said Kent. We are nearer her age than any of the other cousins, and Papa is the oldest uncle, so I guess she will, added Millie, the 14-year-old daughter of the house. She said she liked America, said quiet Frank. Wonder if she will give us a lot of her money, put in practical Fred, who was always in debt. Stop that, commanded Kent. Mind now, if you ever ask her for a penny, I'll shake you out of your jacket. Hush, she's coming, cried Millie, and a dead silence followed the lively chatter. A fresh-faced, bright-eyed girl of 15 came in quietly, glanced at the group on the rug, and paused as if uncertain whether she was wanted. Come on, said Fred encouragingly. Would I be in the way? She asked. Oh dear no, we were only talking, answered Millie, drawing her cousin nearer with an arm about her waist. It sounded like something pleasant, said Kate, not exactly knowing what to say. We were talking about you, began little May. A poke from Frank made her stop to ask, what's that for? We were talking about Kate, and we all said we liked her, so it's no matter if I tell. You are very kind, said Kate, looking so pleased that the children forgave May's awkward frankness. Yes, and we hoped you'd like us and stay with us, added Kent, in the lofty and polite manner that he thought became a young man of his stature. I am going to live with all the uncles in turn and then decide, Kate answered. Papa wished it. The words made her lips tremble slightly, for her father was the only parent she could remember and had been unusually dear to her for that reason. Can you play billiards? Asked Fred, who had a horror of seeing girls cry. Yes, and I will be glad to teach you. You had a pony carriage at your house, didn't you? Added Frank, eager to hear more. At Grandma's I had no other home, you know, answered Kate. What will you buy first with your money? Asked May, who seemed determined to ask improper questions. I'd buy a grandma if I could, and Kate both smiled and sighed. How funny, said May. We have a grandma who lives ever so far away in the country, we don't think of her much. You do, said Kate, who turned quickly, looking full of interest. Yes, Papa's mother is very old, added Millie. Papa writes to her sometimes, and Mama sends her things every Christmas. We don't know much about her, for we've only seen her once, a great long time ago, but we do care for her. Perhaps I shall go and see her, said Kate with a smile. I can't get on without a grandmother. Tell me all you know about her. Is she a dear lady? We only know this. She is lame and lives in the old house where Papa grew up. She has a maid named Dolly, and that's all I can tell you about her, said Molly, looking a little vexed that she could say no more of the subject that seemed to interest her cousin so much. Kate looked surprised, but said nothing, and stood looking at the fire as if turning the matter over in her mind, and trying to answer the question she was too polite to ask how could they have a grandmother and know so little about her. At that moment, the tea bell rang, and the flock ran laughing downstairs. Kate said no more to her cousins, but she remembered the conversation and laid a plan in her resolute little mind. According to her father's wish, Kate was to live for a while with the families of each of her 4 uncles before she decided with which she would make her home. All were anxious to have her. one because of her money, another because her great-grandfather had been a lord, a third hoped to secure her hand for the son of a close friend, while the fourth and best family loved her for herself alone. They were worthy people, as the world goes busy, ambitious, and prosperous, and every one, old and young, was fond of bright, pretty, generous Kate. Each family was anxious to keep her, a little jealous of the rest and very eager to know which she would choose. But Kate surprised them all by saying decidedly when the time came, "I would like to meet my grandma before I choose. Perhaps I should have visited her first, as she is the oldest. I believe Papa would have wished it so. At any rate, I feel I must pay her tribute before I settle anywhere." Some of the young cousins laughed at the idea and her old-fashioned, respectful way of putting it. It was a strong contrast to their free and easy American speech. The uncles were also surprised, but they agreed to humor her whim. Uncle George, the eldest, said softly, "I should have remembered that poor Anna was Mother's only daughter. Naturally, she would love to see the girl. But, dear, I must warn you, it will be desperately dull. Just two old women in a quiet country town. No fun, no company. You won't want to stay long, I can assure you." "I shall not mind the dullness for the chance to meet my grandmother," Kate replied. "Perhaps the sight of me will please her, for many say I look like my mamma." Something in the earnest, young face reminded Uncle George of the sister he had almost forgotten, and recalled his own youth so pleasantly that he said, with a caress of the curly head beside him, "I believe it would. In fact, I'm sure of it. Now that you say it, I have a mind to go with you and pay tribute to my mother as you have so sweetly put it. Oh my, but I would like to surprise her and have her all to myself for a little while. Would you mind if I went quite alone? All of you could come later if it pleases you," answered Kate. "Of course, it will be managed exactly as you like," answered Uncle George. "I know you will bring sunshine to our old mother's life just as you have to ours. I haven't seen her for a year, but I know she is well and comfortable, and Dolly guards her like a dragon. Give her my love, sweet Kate, and tell her we have sent her something she will value 100 times more than the very best tea, the finest cap, or the most handsome tabby cat who ever purred." So, in spite of the protestations of her cousins, Kate went happily off to find the grandmother whom no one else seemed to value as she did. Grandpa had been a farmer and lived contentedly on the old place until he died, but his 4 sons wanted to be something better, so they went away one after the other to make their way in the world. All worked hard, earned a good living, and forgot, as far as possible, the dull lives they had led in the old place from which they had come. They were all good sons in their own way, and had each offered his mother a home with him if she cared to come. But Grandma clung to the old home, the simple ways, and the quiet life. She thanked them gratefully, but chose to remain in the big farmhouse, empty, lonely, and plain though it was compared to the fine homes in which her sons lived. Little by little the busy men seemed to forget their quiet, uncomplaining old mother, who spent her years thinking of them, longing to see and know their children, and hoping that one day they would remember how much she loved them. Now and then one of her sons would pay her a hasty visit, and all sent gifts of far less value to her than one loving look, 1 hour of dutiful, affectionate companionship. "If you ever want me, send and I'll come. Or if you ever need a home, remember the old place is always open and you are always welcome here," the good old lady had told them. But they never seemed to need her, and so seldom came that she concluded the old place evidently held no charming memories for them. It was hard. But the sweet old woman bore it patiently and lived her lonely life quietly and usefully, with her faithful maid Dolly, who served and loved and supported her. Anna, her only daughter, had married young, gone to England, and dying early, had left her only child to her husband and his family. Among them, little Kate had grown up, knowing scarcely anything about her American relatives. She had been the pet of her English grandmother, and finding all her aunts to be busy, fashionable women, had longed for the tender fostering she had known, and now felt as if only grandmothers could give. With a flutter of hope and expectation, she approached the old house after the long journey was over. Leaving the luggage at the inn and accompanied only by her nurse, Bessie, Kate went up the village street and, pausing at the gate, looked with interest at the home where her mother had been born. It was a large, old-fashioned farmhouse, with a hospitable porch and tall trees in front. Her uncles had told her that the house also had a lovely orchard in back and a hill, which grew over with luscious wild blackberries in summer and provided the perfect place for sledding in winter. Kate noticed that all the upper windows were curtained, making the house look as if it were half asleep. At one of the lower windows, she spotted a portly puss, blinking in the sun. Just to the side and behind, she was certain she could see a cap, a regular grandmotherly old cap with a little black bow on the back. Something about the lonely look of the house and the pensive droop of that cap made Kate hurry on up the walk and eagerly tap the front door with the antique knocker. A brisk little old woman peered out as if startled at the sound. Kate asked, smiling, "Does Madame Coverley live here?" "She surely does, my dear," said the maid. "Come right in." Then, throwing wide the door, she led the way down the long, wide hall and announced in a low tone to her mistress, "A lovely young girl is here to see you, Mum." "I would love to see a young face, Dolly. Who is it?" she asked in a gentle voice. Before Dolly could answer that she didn't know the identity of their visitor, Kate stepped straight up to the old lady with both hands out. "Grandma, can't you guess?" she asked. The first sight of her grandmother's dear face had won her heart. Lifting her spectacles, Grandma examined her for a moment, then opened her arms without a word. In the long embrace that followed, Kate felt assured that she was welcome in the home she wanted. "So like my Anna, and this is her little girl. God bless you, my darling. You are so good to come and see me," said Grandma when the emotion had passed and she was able to speak again. "Why, Grandma, as soon as I knew where to find you, I was in a tizzy to come. Already I know that I will want to stay here with you as long as you will have me," Kate said, caressing her grandmother's hand affectionately. "Then you shall never leave, for I will always want you, my darling," Grandma assured her. "Now tell me everything. It is like an angel coming to see me quite unannounced. Sit close, and let me feel sure it isn't one of the dreams I create to cheer myself when I'm feeling lonely." Kate sat on a little stool at her grandmother's feet and, leaning on her knee, told all her little story. All the while, the old lady fed her hungry eyes with the sight of the fresh, young face, listened to the music of the child's loving voice, and felt the happy certainty that God had sent her a wonderful gift. Kate spent the long, happy day talking and listening, looking at her new home, and to her delight, being fawned over by the two old women. Her eyes quickly read the truth of Grandma's lonely life, and her warm heart was soon flooded with tender pity for her. Kate resolved to devote herself to making her grandmother happy in her few remaining years, for at 80, everyone should have the blessing of loving children. To Dolly and Madame, it really did seem as if an angel had come, a singing, smiling, chattering sprite who danced all over the old house, making blithe echoes in the silent house and brightening every room she entered. They also soon grew fond of Bessie, who welcomed their help caring for her charge. Kate opened all the shutters and let in the sun, saying she must see which room she liked best before she settled in. She played on the old piano, which wheezed and jangled all out of tune, but no one minded, for the girlish voice was as sweet as a lark's. She invaded Dolly's sacred kitchen and messed to her heart's content, delighting the old soul by praising her skill and begging to be taught all she knew. She took possession of Grandma's little parlor and made it so cozy that the old lady felt as if she might have stumbled into someone else's front room. Cushioned armchairs, fur footstools, soft rugs, and delicate warm shawls appeared like magic. Kate planted flowers in the deep, sunny window seats, and hung pictures of lovely places on the oaken walls. She found a dainty work-basket for herself and placed it near Grandma's quaint one. And best of all, she spent plenty of time in the little chair next to Grandma's rocker. The first thing in the morning, Kate awakened her grandmother with a kiss and a cheery, "Good morning," and all day she hovered about her with willing hands and quick feet. Kate's loving heart returned her grandmother's love and pledged her the tender reverence, which is the beautiful tribute the young should pay the old. In the twilight, the bright head could always be found at the old woman's knee, listening to the stories of the past or making lively plans for the future. Together, they whiled away the time that had once been filled with sadness. Kate never found it lonely, seldom wished for other society, and grew every day more certain that, in this home, she would find the cherishing she needed and do the good she hoped to do for others. Dolly and Bessie were on capital terms, each trying to see which could sing little Kate's praises loudest and spoil her quickest by unquestioning obedience to her every whim. They were a happy family indeed, and the dull November days went by so fast that Christmas was at hand before they knew it. All the uncles had written to ask Kate to pass the holidays with them, feeling sure that by then she would be longing for a change. But she had refused them all, thanking them for their gracious invitations. "I wish to stay with Grandma," she told them, "for she cannot go to join other people's merrymaking." Her uncles urged, her aunts advised, and her cousins teased, but Kate denied them all, yet offended no one, for she was inspired by a grand idea and carried it out with help from Dolly and Bessie. Her grandma never suspected a thing. "We are going to have a little Christmas fun up here among ourselves, and you mustn't know about it until we are ready. So just sit all cozy in your chair and let me riot about as I like. I know you won't mind, and I think you'll say it is splendid when I've carried out my plan," said Kate, when the old lady wondered what she was thinking about so deeply, with her brows knit and her lips smiling. "Very well, dear, do anything you like, and I shall enjoy it, only please don't tire yourself out by trying to do too much," said Grandma. And with that she became deaf and blind to the mysteries that went on about her. Because her grandma was lame and seldom left her few favorite rooms, Kate, with the help of her devoted helpers, was able to turn the house topsy-turvy. Together, the three trimmed the hall and parlor and great dining room with shining holly and evergreen, lay fires ready for kindling on the hearths that had been cold for years, and made beds fit for sleeping all over the house. What went on in the kitchen, only Dolly could tell. But such delicious odors as stole out made Grandma sniff the air and think of Merry Christmas revels long ago. Up in her room, Kate wrote lots of letters and sent so many orders to the city that Bessie was soon throwing up her hands. More letters came in reply, and Kate studied each one carefully with a look of pure happiness on her face. Big bundles were left by the expressman, who came so often that the gates were left open, and the lawn was full of sleigh tracks. The shops in the village were ravaged by Mistress Kate, who laid in stores of bright ribbon, toys, nuts, and all manner of delightful things. "I really think the sweet young thing has lost her mind," said the postmaster as she flew out of the office one day with a handful of letters. If Grandma had thought the girl out of her wits, no one could have blamed her, for on Christmas Day she really did behave in the most puzzling manner. "You are going to church with me this morning, Grandma. It's all arranged. A closed sleigh is coming for us. The sleighing is lovely, the church all trimmed out for the holidays, and I must have you see it. I shall wrap you in fur, and we will go and say our prayers together like good girls, won't we?" said Kate, who was in an unusual flutter, her eyes shining bright, her lips full of smiles, and her feet dancing in spite of her. "Anywhere you like, my darling," Grandma answered. "I'd start for Australia tomorrow if you wanted me to go with you." So they went to church, and Grandma did enjoy it, for she had many blessings to thank God for, chief among them the treasure of a dutiful, loving child. Kate tried to keep herself quiet, but the odd little flutter would not subside and seemed to get worse and worse as time went on. It increased rapidly as they drove home, and when Grandma was safe in her little parlor again, Kate's hands trembled so she could hardly tie the strings of the old lady's fancy cap. "We must take a look in the big parlor. It is all trimmed out and I have my presents in there. Is it ready, Dolly?" Kate asked, as the dear old servant appeared looking greatly excited. "We have been quiet so long, poor Dolly doesn't know what to make of a little gaiety," Grandma said, smiling at her beloved companion. "Lord bless us, my dear Mum. It's all so beautiful and kind of surprising. I feel as if miracles are coming to pass again," answered Dolly, actually wiping away a tear with her best apron. "Come, Grandma," urged Kate, offering her arm. "You look so sweet and dear," she added, smoothing the soft, silken shawl about the old lady's shoulders and kissing the placid old face that beamed at her from under the festive new cap. "I always said Madam was the finest and dearest of women," Dolly went on. "But do hurry, Miss Kate. That parlor door could burst open at any moment and spoil the surprise," with which mysterious remark Dolly vanished, giggling. Across the hall they went, but at the door Kate paused and said with a look Grandma never forgot, "I hope I have done right. I hope you will like my present and not find it too much for you. At any rate, remember that I meant to please you and give you the thing you need and long for most, my dear, sweet grandmother." "My good child, don't be afraid. I shall like anything you do and thank you for your thoughtfulness," Grandma answered. "But oh my, what a curious noise." Without another word, Kate threw open the door and led Grandma in. Only a step or two, for the lady stopped short and stared about her, as if she didn't know her own best parlor. No wonder she didn't, for it was full of people, and such people. All her sons, their wives, and children rose as she came in, and turned to greet her with smiling faces. Uncle George went up and kissed her, saying, with a choke in his voice, "A Merry Christmas, Mother." And everybody echoed the words in a chorus of goodwill that went straight to the heart. Poor Grandma could not bear it and sat down in her big chair, trembling and sobbing like a little child. Kate hung over her, fearing the surprise had been too much. But joy seldom kills, and presently the old lady was calm enough to look up and welcome them all by stretching out her feeble hands and saying, brokenly yet heartily, "God bless you, my children. This is a Merry Christmas indeed. Now tell me all about what you've been doing, and give me names, for I don't know half the little ones." Then Uncle George explained that it was Kate's plan, and told how she had made everyone agree to it, pleading so eloquently for Grandma that all the other plans were given up. They had arrived while she was at church and had been, with difficulty, kept from bursting out before the time. "Do you like your present?" whispered Kate, quite calm and happy now that the grand surprise was safely over. Grandma answered with a silent kiss that said more than the warmest words, and then Kate put everyone at ease by leading up the children, one by one, and introducing each with some lively speech. Everyone enjoyed this and became acquainted quickly, for Grandma thought the children the most remarkable she had ever seen. The little people soon made up their minds that an old lady who had such a very nice, big house and such a dinner waiting for them, of course, they had peeped everywhere, was a most desirable and charming grandma. By the time the first raptures were over, Dolly and Bessie had dinner on the table, and the procession, headed by Madam, proudly escorted by her eldest son, filed into the dining room where such a party had not met for years. The dinner itself was most spectacular. Everyone partook copiously of everything, and they laughed and talked, told stories, and sang songs. The cheer they gave Grandma was almost too much for her to bear. After that, the elders sat with Grandma in the parlor, while the younger part of the flock trooped after Kate all over the house. Fires burned everywhere, and the long unused toys that had belonged to their fathers were brought out for their amusement. The big nursery was full of games, and here Bessie collected the little ones when the older boys and girls were invited by Kate to go outside for sledding. The evening ended with a cozy tea and a dance in the long hall. The going to bed that night was the best joke of all, for though Kate's arrangements were a bit odd, everyone loved them quite well. There were many rooms, but not enough for all to have one apiece. So the uncles and aunts had the 4 big chambers. All the boys were ordered into the great playroom, where beds were made on the floor and a great fire was blazing. The nursery was devoted to the girls, and the little ones were sprinkled round wherever a snug corner was found. How the riotous flock were ever packed away into their beds no one knows. The lads caroused until long past midnight, and no knocking on the walls of paternal boots or whispered entreaties of maternal voices through the keyholes had any effect, for it was impossible to resist the present advantages for a grand Christmas rampage. The older girls giggled and told secrets, while the little ones tumbled into bed and went to sleep at once, quite exhausted by the festivities of this remarkable day. Grandma, down in her own cozy room, sat listening to the blithe noises with a smile on her face, for the past seemed to have come back again. It was as if her own boys and girls were once again frolicking in the rooms above her head as they had done 40 years before. "It's all so beautiful. I can't go to bed, Dolly, and lose any of it. They'll go away tomorrow, and I may never see them again," she said, as Dolly tied on her nightcap and brought her slippers. "Yes, you will, Mum. That dear child has made it so pleasant that they won't be able to stay away. You'll see plenty of them if they carry out half the plans they had made. Mrs. George wants to come up and pass the summer here. Mr. Tom says he shall send his boys to school here, and every girl among them has promised Kate to make her a long visit. You'll never be lonely again, Mum." "Thank God for that," Grandma said, bowing her head to acknowledge that she had received a great blessing. "Dolly, I want to go and look at those children. It seems so like a dream to have them here. I must be sure of it," said Grandma, folding her wrapper about her and getting up with great decision. "Oh my, Mum," Dolly protested. "You haven't been up those stairs in months. The dears are just fine, sleeping warm as toast." But Grandma would go, so Dolly gave her an arm, and together the 2 dear friends hobbled up the wide stairs and peeped in at the precious children. The lads looked like a camp of weary warriors reposing after a victory, and Grandma went laughing away when she had taken a proud survey of this promising portion of the younger generation. The nursery was like a little convent full of rosy nuns sleeping peacefully, while a picture of St. Agnes, with her lamb, smiled on them from the wall. The firelight flickered over the white figures and sweet faces, as if the sight were too fair to be lost in darkness. The little ones lay about, looking like little cupids with sugar hearts and faded roses still clutched in their chubby hands. "My darlings," whispered Grandma, lingering fondly over them to cover a pair of rosy feet, put back a pile of tumbled curls, or kiss a little mouth still smiling in its sleep. But when she came to the coldest corner of the room, where Kate lay on the hardest mattress, under the thinnest quilt, the old lady's eyes were full of tender tears. Forgetting the stiff joints that bent so painfully, she knelt slowly down and, putting her arms about the girl, blessed her in silence for the happiness she had given one old heart. Kate woke at once and started up, exclaiming with a smile, "Why, Grandma, I was dreaming about an angel, and you look like one with your white gown and silvery hair." "No, dear, you are the angel in this house. How can I ever give you up?" answered Madame, holding fast the treasure that came to her so late. "You never need to, Grandma, for I have made my choice." The quiet little woman Patty stood at the window looking thoughtfully down at a group of girls playing in the yard below. All had cropped heads, all wore brown gowns with blue aprons, and all were orphans like herself. Some were pretty and some plain, some rosy and gay, some pale and feeble, but all seemed to be happy and having a good time in spite of many hardships. More than once, one of the girls nodded and beckoned to Patty, but she shook her head decidedly and continued to stand listlessly watching and thinking to herself with a child's impatient spirit, "Oh, if someone would only come and take me away. I'm so tired of living here, and I don't think I can bear it much longer." Poor Patty might well wish for a change. She had been in the orphanage ever since she could remember. And though everyone was very kind to her, she was heartily tired of the place and longed to find a home. At the orphanage, the children were taught and cared for until they were old enough to help themselves. Then they were adopted or went to work as servants. Now and then, some forlorn child was claimed by family. And once the relatives of a little girl named Katy proved to be rich and generous people who came for her in a fine carriage, treated all the other girls in honor of the happy day, and from time to time let Katy visit them with arms full of gifts for her former playmates and friends. Katy's situation made a great stir in the orphanage, and the children never tired of talking about it and telling it to newcomers as a sort of modern-day fairy tale. For a time, each hoped to be claimed in the same way, and listening to stories of what they would do when their turn came was a favorite amusement. By and by, Katy ceased to come, and gradually new girls took the places of those who had left. Eventually, Katy's good fortune was forgotten by all but Patty. To her, it remained a splendid possibility, and she comforted her loneliness by dreaming of the day her folks would come for her and bear her away to a future of luxury and pleasure, rest and love. But year after year, no one came for Patty, who worked and waited as others were chosen, and she was left to the many duties and few pleasures of her dull life. People who came for pets chose the pretty little ones, and those who wanted servants took the tall, strong, merry-faced girls, who spoke up brightly and promised to learn to do anything required of them. Patty's pale face, short figure with one shoulder higher than the other, and shy ways limited her opportunities. She was not ill now, but looked so, and was a sober, quiet little woman at the age of 13. The good matron often recommended Patty as a neat, capable, and gentle little person, but no one seemed to want her, and after every failure her heart grew heavier and her face sadder, for the thought of spending the rest of her life there in the orphanage was unbearable. No one guessed what a world of hopes and thoughts and feelings lay hidden beneath that blue pinafore, what dreams this solitary child enjoyed, or what a hungry, aspiring young soul lived in her crooked little body. But God knew, and when the time came, He remembered Patty and sent her the help she so desperately needed. Sometimes when we least expect it, a small cross proves a lovely crown. A seemingly unimportant event becomes a lifelong experience, or a stranger becomes a friend. It happened so now, for as Patty said aloud with a great sigh, "I don't think I can bear it any longer," a hand touched her shoulder and a voice said gently, "Bear what, my child?" The touch was so light and the voice so kind that Patty answered before she had time to feel shy. "Living here, ma'am, and never being chosen as the other girls are. Tell me all about it, dear." "I'm waiting for my sister, and I'd like to hear your troubles," the kindly woman said, sitting down in the window seat and drawing Patty beside her. She was not young or pretty or finely dressed. She was instead a gray-haired woman dressed in plain black, but her eyes were so cheerful and her voice so soothing that Patty felt at ease in a minute and nestled up to her as she shared her little woes in a few simple words. "You don't know anything about your parents?" asked the lady. "No, ma'am. I was left here as a baby without even a name pinned to me, and no one has come to find me. But I shouldn't wonder if they did come even now, so I keep ready all the time and work as hard as I can so they won't be ashamed of me, for I guess my folks is respectable," Patty replied, lifting her head with an air of pride that made the lady ask with a smile, "What makes you think so?" "Well, I heard the matron tell the lady who chose Nellie Bryan that she always thought I came of high folks because I was so different from the others, and my ways was nice, and my feet so small, see if they ain't," and slipping them out of the rough shoes she wore, Patty held up two slender little feet with the arched insteps that tell of good birth. Miss Murray, for that was her name, laughed right out loud at the innocent vanity of the poor child and said heartily, "They are small, and so are your hands in spite of work. Your hair is fine, your eyes are soft and clear, and you are a good child, I'm sure, which is best of all." Pleased and touched by the praise that is so pleasant to us all, yet half ashamed of herself, Patty blushed and smiled, put on her shoes, and said with unusual animation, "I'm pretty good, I believe, and I know I'd be much better if I could only get out. I do so long to see trees and grass and sit in the sun and listen to the birds. I'd work real hard and be happy if I could live in the country." "What can you do?" asked Miss Murray, stroking Patty's smooth head and looking down into the wistful eyes fixed upon her. Modestly, but with a flutter of hope in her heart, Patty recited her domestic accomplishments. It was a good list for a 13-year-old, for Patty had been working hard for so long that she had become unusually clever at all sorts of housework as well as needlework. As she ended, she asked timidly, "Did you come for a girl, ma'am?" "My sister-in-law, Mrs. Murray, did, but she found one she likes and is going to take her on trial." Her answer caused the light to fade from Patty's eyes and the hope to die in her heart. "Who is it, please?" she asked. "Lizzie Brown, a tall, nice-looking girl of 14. You won't like her, I know, for Lizzie is a real—" There Patty stopped short, turned red, and looked down as if ashamed to meet the keen, kind eyes fixed on her. "A real what? Please, ma'am, don't ask. It was mean of me to say that, and I mustn't go on. Lizzie can't help being good with you, and I am glad she has a chance to go away." Aunt Jane Murray asked no more questions, but she noted the little glimpse of character and tried to brighten Patty's mood by talking about something of interest to her. "Suppose your folks, as you say, never come for you, and you never find your fortune as some girls do, can't you make friends and fortune for yourself?" "How can I?" questioned Patty wonderingly. "By cheerfully taking whatever comes, by being helpful and affectionate to all, and by wasting no time dreaming about what may happen, but bravely making each day a comfort and a pleasure to yourself and others. Can you do that?" "I can try, ma'am," answered Patty meekly. "I wish you would, and when I come again you can tell me how you are doing. I believe you will succeed, and when you do, you will have found for yourself a fine fortune and confident certainty of your friends. Now I must go." "Cheer up, dearie, your turn will come one day." With a kiss that won Patty's heart, Miss Murray went away, casting more than one look of pity at the small figure sobbing in the window seat, with a blue pinafore over her face. This disappointment was doubly hard for Patty because Lizzie was not a good girl and, to her mind, did not deserve such good fortune. Besides, Patty had taken a great fancy to the lady who spoke so kindly to her. For a week after this she went about her work with a sad face, and all her daydreams were of living with Miss Jane Murray in the country. Monday afternoon, as Patty stood sprinkling clothes for ironing, one of the girls burst in, saying all in a breath, "Patty, someone has come for you at last, and you are to go right up to the parlor. It's Mrs. Murray. She brought Liz back 'cause she told fibs and was lazy. Liz is as mad as hops, for it is a real nice place with cows and pigs and chickens and children, and the work ain't hard, and she wanted to stay. Do hurry, and don't stand staring at me that way." "It can't be me, no one ever wants me, it's some mistake," stammered Patty, who was so startled and excited that she did not know what to say or do. "It's no mistake," the girl insisted. "Mrs. Murray won't have anyone but you, and the matron says you are to come right up. Go along, I'll finish here. I'm so glad you have your chance at last." And with a good-natured hug, the girl pushed Patty out of the kitchen. In a few minutes, Patty came flying back in a twitter of delight to report that she was leaving at once and must say good-bye. Everyone was pleased, and when the flurry was over, the carriage drove away with the happiest little girl you have ever seen riding inside, for at last someone did want her. Patty had found a place. During the first year Patty lived with the Murrays, they found her to be industrious, docile, and faithful, and yet she was not happy and had not found with them all she expected. They were kind to her, providing plenty of food and not too much work. They clothed her comfortably, let her go to church, and did not scold her very often. But no one showed that they loved her, no one praised her efforts, no one seemed to think that she had any hope or wish beyond her daily work, and no one saw in the shy, quiet little maiden a lonely, tender-hearted girl longing for a crumb of the love so freely given to the children of the home. The Murrays were busy people with a large farm to care for. The master and his oldest son were hard at it all summer. Mrs. Murray was a brisk, smart housewife who flew round herself and expected others to do the same. Pretty Ella, the daughter, was about Patty's age and busy with her school, her little pleasures, and all the bright plans young girls love and live for. 2 or 3 small lads rioted about the house making much work and doing very little. One of these boys was lame, and this fact seemed to establish a sort of friendly understanding between him and Patty. In truth, he was the only one who ever expressed any regard for her. She was very good to him, always ready to help, always patient with his fretfulness and always quick to understand his sensitive nature. She's only a servant, a charity girl who works for her board and wears my old clothes. She's good enough in her place, but of course she can't expect to be like one of us, Ella once said to a young friend, and Patty heard her. Only a servant. That was the hard part, and it never occurred to anyone to make it softer, so Patty plodded on, still hoping and dreaming about friends and fortune. Had it not been for Aunt Jane, the child might not have gotten on at all. But Miss Murray never forgot her, even though she lived 20 miles away and seldom came to the farm. She wrote once a month and never failed to include a little note to Patty, which she fully expected would be answered. Patty wrote a neat reply, which was very stiff and short at first. But after a time, she quite poured out her heart to this one friend who sent her encouraging words, cheered her with praise now and then, and made her anxious to be all Miss Jane seemed to expect. No one in the house took much notice of this correspondence, for Aunt Jane was considered odd, and Patty posted her replies with the stamps her friend provided. This was Patty's anchor in her little sea of troubles, and she clung to it, hoping for the day when she had earned such a beautiful reward that she would be allowed to go and live with Miss Murray. Christmas was coming, and the family was filled with great anticipation, for they intended to spend the day at Aunt Jane's and bring her home for dinner and a dance the next day. For a week beforehand, Mrs. Murray flew round with more than her accustomed speed, and Patty trotted about from morning till night, lending a hand to all the most disagreeable jobs. Ella did the light, pretty work, and spent much time fussing over her new dress and the gifts she was making for the boys. When everything was done at last, Mrs. Murray declared that she would drop if she had another thing to do but go to Jane's and rest. Patty had lived on the hope of going with them, but nothing was said about it. At last, they all trooped gaily away to the station, leaving her to take care of the house and see that the cat did not touch one of the dozen pies carefully stored in the pantry. Patty kept up bravely until they were gone. Then she sat down like Cinderella and cried until she could cry no more. It certainly did seem as if she were never to have any fun, and no fairy godmother came to help her. The shower of tears did her good, and she went about her work with a meek, patient face that would have touched a heart of stone. All the morning she worked to finish the odd jobs left for her to do, and in the afternoon, as the only approach to the holiday she dared venture, Patty sat at the parlor window and watched other people go to and fro, intent on merrymaking in which she had no part. Her only pleasant little task was that of arranging gifts for the small boys. Miss Jane had given her a bit of money now and then, and out of her meager store, the loving child had made presents for the lads, poor ones certainly, but full of goodwill and the desire to win some affection in return. The family did not return as early as she had expected, which made the evening seem very long. Patty got out her treasure box and, sitting on the warm kitchen hearth, tried to amuse herself while the wind howled outside and the snow fell fast. When Aunt Jane welcomed the family, her first word as she emerged from a chaos of small boys' arms and legs was, "Why, where is Patty?" "At home, of course. Where else would she be?" answered Mrs. Murray. "Here with you. I said all come in my letter, didn't you understand it?" "Goodness, Jane, you didn't mean to bring her too, I hope." "Yes, I did, and I'm quite disappointed. I'd go and get her myself if I had the time." Miss Jane knit her brows and looked vexed, and Ella laughed at the idea of a servant girl going on holiday with the family. "It can't be helped now, so we'll say no more and make it up to Patty tomorrow if we can." Aunt Jane smiled her own pleasant smile and kissed the little lads all round as if to sweeten her temper as soon as possible. They had a capital time, and no one observed that Auntie, now and then, directed the conversation to Patty by asking a question about her or picking up on every little hint dropped by the boys concerning her patience and kindness. At last, Mrs. Murray said, as she sat resting with a cushion at her back, a stool at her feet, and a cup of tea steaming deliciously under her nose, "Afraid to leave her there in charge? Oh dear, no. I've entire confidence in her, and she is equal to taking care of the house for a week if need be. On the whole, Jane, I consider her a pretty promising girl. She isn't very quick, but she is faithful, steady, and honest as daylight. High praise from you, Maria. I hope she knows your good opinion of her." "No, indeed. It wouldn't do to pamper a girl's pride by praising her. I say, 'Very well, Patty,' when I'm satisfied, and that's quite enough." "Ah, but you wouldn't be satisfied if George only said, 'Very well, Maria,' when you had done your very best to please him in some way." "That's a different thing," began Mrs. Murray, but Miss Jane shook her head, and Ella said, laughing, "It's no use to try to convince Auntie on that point. She has taken a fancy to Pat and won't see any fault in her. She's a good enough child, but I can't get anything out of her. She is so odd and shy." "I can. She's first-rate and takes care of me better than anyone else," said Harry, the lame boy, with sudden warmth. Patty had quite won his selfish little heart by many services. "She'll make Mother a nice helper as she grows up, and I consider it a good speculation. In 4 years she'll be 18, and if she goes on doing so well, I won't begrudge her wages," added Mr. Murray, who sat nearby with a small son on each knee. "She'd be quite pretty if she were straight and plump and jolly. But she is as sober as a deacon, and when her work is done, she sits in a corner watching us with big eyes as shy and mute as a mouse," said Ned, the big brother, lounging on the sofa. "A dull, steady-going girl suited for a servant and no more," concluded Mrs. Murray, setting down her cup as if the subject were closed. "You are quite mistaken, and I'll prove it," Aunt Jane announced, jumping up so energetically that the boys laughed and the elders looked annoyed. Pulling out a portfolio, Aunt Jane untied a little bundle of letters, saying impressively, "Now listen, all of you, and see what has been going on with Patty this year." Then Miss Jane read the little letters one by one, and it was curious to see how the faces of the listeners first grew attentive, then touched, then self-reproachful, and finally filled with interest and respect and something very like affection for little Patty. These letters were pathetic, as Auntie read them to listeners who could supply much that the writer generously left unsaid, and the involuntary comments of the hearers proved the truth of Patty's words. "Does she envy me because I'm pretty and gay and have a good time? I never thought how hard it must be for her to see me have all the fun and she all the work. She's a girl like me, and I might have done more for her than give her my old clothes and let her help me get dressed for parties," said Ella hastily, as Aunt Jane laid aside one letter in which poor Patty told of many good times and she not in 'em. "Sakes alive! If I'd known the child wanted me to kiss her now and then as I do the rest, I'd have done it in a minute," said Mrs. Murray, with sudden softness in her sharp eyes as Aunt Jane read this little bit. "I am grateful, but oh, I'm so lonely, and it's so hard not to have any mother like the other children. If Mrs. Murray would only kiss me good night sometimes, it would do me more good than pretty clothes or nice food. I've been thinking I'd let her go to school ever since I heard her showing Bob how to do his lessons, but Mother didn't think she could spare her," broke in Mr. Murray apologetically. "If Ella would help a little, I guess I could allow it. Anyway, we might try for a while, since she is so eager to learn," added his wife, anxious not to seem unjust in Jane's eyes. Well, Joe laughed at her as much as I did when the boys hunched up their shoulders the way she does, cried conscience-stricken Bob, who had just heard a sad little paragraph about her crooked figure, and learned that it came from lugging heavy babies at the orphanage. "I cuffed 'em both for it, and I have always liked Patty," said Harry, in a moral tone which moved Ned to say, "You'd be a selfish little rascal if you didn't, when she slaves so for you and gets no thanks for it. Now that I know how it tires her poor little back to carry wood and water, I shall do it myself, of course. If she'd only told me, I'd have done it all the time." And so it went until the letters were done, and they knew Patty as she was. Each felt sorry that he or she had not found her out before. Aunt Jane freed her mind on the subject, but the others continued to discuss it until quite an enthusiastic state of feeling set in, and Patty was in danger of being killed with kindness. It is astonishing how generous and clever people are when once awakened to duty, a charity, or a wrong. Now everyone was eager to repair past neglect, and if Aunt Jane had not wisely restrained them, the young folks would have done something absurd. They laid many nice little plans to surprise Patty, and each privately resolved not only to give her a Christmas gift, but also to do the better thing by turning over a new leaf for the new year. All the way home, they talked over their various projects, and the boys kept bouncing into the seat with Aunt Jane to ask advice about their funny ideas. It must have been rather lonesome for the poor little soul all day. "I declare, I wish we'd taken her along," said Mrs. Murray as they approached the house through the softly falling snow. "She's got a jolly good fire all ready for us, and that's a mercy, for I'm half frozen," said Harry, hopping up the step. "Don't you think if I touch up my blue merino, it would fit Patty and make a nice dress along with one of my white aprons?" whispered Ella, as she helped Aunt Jane out of the sleigh. "I hope the child isn't sick or scared." "It's 2 hours later than I expected to be home," added Mr. Murray, stepping up to peep in at the kitchen window, for no one came to open the door and no light but the blaze of the fire shone out. "Come softly and look in," he whispered, beckoning to the rest. "It's a pretty little sight even if it is in a kitchen." Quietly creeping to the 2 low windows, they all looked in, and no one said a word, for the lonely little figure was both pretty and pathetic when they remembered the letters lately read. Patty lay flat on the old rug, fast asleep with one arm pillowed under her head. In the other arm lay Puss in a cozy bunch, as if she had crept there to be sociable since there was no one else to share Patty's long vigil. A row of slippers, large and small, stood warming on the hearth, 2 little nightgowns hung over a chair, the teapot stood in a warm nook, and through the open door they could see the lamp burning brightly in the sitting room, the table ready and all things in order. Faithful little creature! "She's thought of every blessed thing, and I'll go right in and wake her with a good kiss," cried Mrs. Murray, darting for the door. But Aunt Jane drew her back, begging her not to frighten the child by any sudden, unexpected demonstrations of affection. So they all went softly, and so softly that tired Patty did not wake, even though Puss pricked up her ears and opened her moony eyes with a lazy purr. "Look here," whispered Bob, pointing to the poor little gifts half tumbling out of Patty's apron. She had been pinning names on them when she fell asleep, and now her secret was known too soon. No one laughed at the presents, and with a look of tender pity, Ella covered the few humble treasures in Patty's box. As she laid back, she remembered what she had once called rubbish, how full her own boxes were with the pretty things girls love, and how easy it would have been to add to Patty's pitiful store. No one exactly knew how to awaken the sleeper, for she was something more than a servant in their eyes now. Aunt Jane settled the matter by stooping down and taking Patty in her arms. The big eyes opened at once and stared up at the face above. Then a smile so bright, so glad, shone all over the child's face as she clung to Aunt Jane, crying joyously, "Is it really you? I was so afraid you wouldn't come that I cried myself to sleep." Never before had any of them seen such love and happiness in Patty's face, heard such a glad, tender sound in her voice, or guessed what an ardent soul dwelt in her quiet body. She was herself again in a minute, and jumping up, slipped away to see that everything was ready should anyone want supper after the cold drive. Soon the family went off to bed, and there was no time to let out the secret. Patty was surprised by the kind good nights everyone sent her way, but she thought no more of it than to feel that Miss Jane brought a warmer atmosphere to the home. Patty's surprise began early the next day, for the first thing she saw upon opening her eyes was a pair of new stockings crammed full of gifts hanging at the foot of her bed, and several parcels lying on the table. What a good time she had opening the delightful bundles! She laughed and cried at the droll things the boys gave, and the comfortable and pretty things the elders sent. Such a happy child was she that when she tried to say her prayers, she couldn't find words beautiful enough to express her gratitude for so much kindness. A new Patty went downstairs that morning, a bright-faced girl with smiles on the mouth that used to be so sad and silent, confidence in the timid eyes, and the magic of the heartiest good-will to make her step light, her hands skillful, her labor a joy, and service no burden. They do care for me, after all, and I never will complain again, she thought with a glad flutter at her heart and sudden color in her cheeks as everyone welcomed her with a friendly, "Merry Christmas, Patty." It was the merriest Christmas ever, and when the bountiful dinner was spread and Patty stood ready to wait, you can imagine her feelings as Mr. Murray pointed to a seat near Miss Jane, and said in a fatherly tone that made his gruff voice sweet, "Sit down and enjoy it with us, my girl. Nobody has more right to it, and we are all one family today." Patty could not eat much, her heart was so full, but it was a splendid feast to her, and when toasts were drunk she was overwhelmed by the honor Harry did her, for he bounced up and exclaimed, "Now we must drink to our Patty, long life and good luck to her." That really was too much, and she fairly ran away to hide her blushes in the kitchen and work off her excitement washing dishes. More surprises came that evening. When she went to put on her clean calico smock, she found the pretty blue dress and white apron laid ready on her bed along with a note that read, "With Ella's love." "It's like a fairy story that keeps getting nicer and nicer since the godmother came," whispered Patty, as she glanced shyly at Aunt Jane. "Christmas is the time for all sorts of pleasant miracles," answered Aunt Jane, smiling back at her little maiden, who looked so neat and blithe in her new dress and happy face. Patty thought nothing further in the way of bliss could happen to her that night, but it did when Ned, anxious to atone for his past neglect, pranced up to her as a final dance was forming and said heartily, "Come, Patty, everyone is to dance this one, even Harry and the cat." And before she could collect her wits enough to say no, she was leading off and flying down the middle with the young master in great style. That was the crowning honor, for she was a girl with all a girl's innocent hopes, fears, desires, and delights, and it had been rather hard to stand by while all the young neighbors were frolicking together. When everyone was gone, the tired children asleep, and the elders on their way up to bed, Mrs. Murray suddenly remembered she had not covered the kitchen fire. Aunt Jane said she would do it, and went down so softly that she did not disturb faithful Patty, who had also gone to see that all was safe. Aunt Jane stopped to watch the little figure standing on the hearth alone, looking into the embers with thoughtful eyes. If Patty could have seen her future there, she would have found a long life spent in glad service to those she loved and who loved her. Not a splendid future, but a useful, happy one, only a servant perhaps, yet a good and faithful woman, blessed with the confidence, respect, and affection of those who knew her genuine worth. As a smile broke over Patty's face, Miss Jane said with an arm round the little blue-gowned figure, "What are you dreaming and smiling about, dearie? The friends that are to come for you someday, with a fine fortune in their pockets. No, ma'am, I feel as if I've found my folks. I don't want any finer fortune than the love they've given me today. I'm trying to think how I can deserve it, and smiling because it's so beautiful and I'm so happy," answered Patty, looking up at her first friend with full eyes and a glad glance that made her lovely. "Tilly's Christmas. I'm so glad tomorrow is Christmas because I'm going to have lots of presents," said Kate, glowing with anticipation. "I'm glad as well," Bessie chimed, "though I don't expect any presents but a pair of mittens." It was Tilly's turn to speak, and she startled them with her words. "I'm very glad tomorrow is Christmas, even though I shan't have any presents at all." These sentiments were spoken as the three little girls trudged home from school, and Tilly's words struck a chord of pity in the others. Kate and Bessie wondered how she could speak so cheerfully and be so happy when she was too poor to receive even the smallest of gifts on Christmas Day. "Don't you wish you could find a purse full of money right here in the path?" asked Kate, the child who was going to have lots of presents. "Oh, don't I? If I could keep it honestly, that is," said Tilly, her eyes glowing at the prospect. "What would you buy?" asked Bessie, rubbing her cold hands and longing for her mittens. "I've worked it all out in my mind," Tilly responded. "I'd buy a pair of large, warm blankets, a load of wood, a shawl for Mother, and a pair of shoes for me. If there was enough left, I'd give Bessie a new hat so that she would not have to wear Ben's old felt one." The girls giggled at that, but Bessie pulled the funny hat down over her ears and said she was much obliged, but she would rather have candy. "Let's look, and maybe we can find a purse. People are always going about with money at Christmas time. How do we know someone has not lost it here on this path?" said Kate. So the three little girls went along the snowy road, looking about them, half in earnest, half in fun. Suddenly Tilly sprang forward, exclaiming loudly, "I see it! I've found a purse." Kate and Bessie followed quickly, but sputtered with disappointment as they realized that there was no purse lying in the snow, but only a little bird. It lay upon the snow with its wings spread and feebly fluttered, too weak to fly. Its little feet were benumbed with cold, and its once bright eyes were dull with pain. Instead of a chip or song, it could only utter a faint chirp now and then as if pleading for help. Nothing but a stupid old robin. How maddening! Cried Kate, sitting down to rest on a nearby tree stump. "I shan't touch it. I found one once and took care of it until it was well. The ungrateful thing flew away the minute it was able," said Bessie, creeping under Kate's shawl and pulling her hands up under her chin to warm them. Tilly heard not a word. "Poor little birdie," she crooned. "How pitiful you look, and how glad you must be to see someone coming along to help you. I'll take you up gently and carry you home to Mother." "Don't be frightened, dear. I am your friend." Tilly knelt down in the snow, stroking the bird with her hand and the tenderest pity in her face. It was only then that she realized Kate and Bessie were laughing. "Don't stop for that thing," they chided. "Now come along. Let's continue looking for a purse before it gets too cold and dark." "You wouldn't leave it to die," cried Tilly. "I'd rather have the bird than the money we might find in a purse. After all, the purse would not be mine, and I would only be tempted to keep it. But this poor little creature will thank and love me for my trouble. Thank goodness I came in time." Gently lifting the bird, Tilly felt its tiny, cold claws cling to her hand, and its dim eyes brighten as it nestled down with a grateful chirp. "Now I've a Christmas present after all," she said, smiling. "I've always wanted a bird, and this one will be such a pretty pet for me." "He'll fly away the first chance he gets and die anyhow," said Bessie. "You'd be better off not to waste your time with him." He can't pay you for taking care of him, and my mother says it isn't worthwhile to help folks that can't help us," added Kate. "My mother said, 'Do to others as you would to be done to by them,' and I'm sure I'd like someone to help me if I was dying of cold and hunger. I also remember the little saying, 'Love your neighbor as yourself.' This bird is my little neighbor, and I'll love him and care for him, just as I often wish our rich neighbor would love and care for us," answered Tilly. She leaned forward slightly, breathing her warm breath over the tiny bird, who looked up at her with confiding eyes, quick to feel and know a friend. "What a funny girl you are," said Kate, "caring for that silly bird and talking about loving your neighbor in that serious way. Mr. King doesn't care a bit for you, and he never will, though he knows how poor you are. So I don't think your plan amounts to much." "I believe it, and I shall be happy to do my part," answered Tilly. "I must bid you good night now, and I hope you'll have a Merry Christmas and receive lots of lovely things." As she left her friends and walked on alone toward the little old house where she lived, Tilly's spirits began to sink. Suddenly, she felt so poor. Her eyes were filled with tears as she thought of all the pretty things other children would be finding in their stockings on Christmas morning. It would have been so pleasant to think of finding something for herself, and pleasanter still to have been able to give her mother something nice. So many comforts were lacking with no hope of getting them. The little family was pressed enough to simply find food and firewood. "Never mind, Bertie," whispered Tilly. "We'll make the best of what we have and be merry in spite of our lack. You shall have a happy Christmas anyway, and I know God won't forget us, even if everyone else does." Tilly stopped a moment to dry her eyes and lean her cheek against the bird's soft breast. The tiny creature afforded her much comfort, though it could only love her, not one thing more. "See, Mother, what a nice present I've found," she cried, entering the house with a cheery face that was like sunshine in the dark room. "I'm glad of that, dearie, as I have not been able to get my little girl anything but a rosy apple. What a poor little bird it is. Here, quickly, give the poor thing some of your warm bread and milk." "Why, Mother, this bowl is so full. I'm afraid you gave me all the milk," said Tilly, smiling over the nice, steaming supper that stood ready for her. "I've had plenty, dear. Sit down and warm your feet. You may put the bird in my basket on this cozy flannel." After placing the bird tenderly into the basket, Tilly peeped into the closet and saw nothing there but dry bread. "Oh dear," Tilly exclaimed to herself. "Mother's given me all the milk and is going without her tea because she knows I'm hungry. I'll surprise her by fixing her a good supper while she is outside splitting wood." As soon as her mother left the room, Tilly reached for the old teapot and carefully poured out a part of the milk. Then from her pocket, she drew a great, plump bun that one of the school children had given her. She had saved it for just this purpose. She toasted a slice of the bun and set a bit of butter on the plate for her mother to put on it. When her mother came in, she found the table drawn up in a warm place, a hot cup of tea ready, and Tilly and the birdie waiting patiently. Such a poor little supper, and yet such a happy one, for love, charity, and contentment were welcome guests around the humble table. That Christmas Eve was a sweeter one even than that at the great house, where lights shone, fires blazed, a great tree glittered, music sounded, and children danced and played. "We must go to bed early," said Tilly's mother as they sat by the fire. "We must save the wood, for there is only enough to last through tomorrow. The day after, I shall be paid for my work, and we can buy more." "If only my bird were a fairy bird and would give us 3 wishes," Tilly said quietly. "How nice that would be. But the poor dear can give me nothing, and it is of no matter." Tilly was looking at the robin, who lay in the basket with his head under his wing, nothing more than a feathery little ball. "He can give you one thing, Tilly," her mother said. "He can give you the pleasure of doing good. That is one of the sweetest things in life, and it can be enjoyed by the poor as well as the rich." As Tilly's mother spoke, she softly stroked her daughter's hair with her tired hand. Suddenly Tilly started with surprise and pointed toward the window. "I saw a man's face," she confided in a frightened whisper. "He was looking in. He's gone now, but I truly saw him." Tilly's mother stood up and went to the door. "Some traveler attracted by the light perhaps," she said. The wind blew cold, the stars shone bright, the snow lay white on the field and the wood, and the Christmas moon was glittering in the sky, but no human person was standing within sight. "What sort of face was it?" asked Tilly's mother, quickly closing the door. "A pleasant sort of face, I think, but I was so startled to see it there that I don't quite know what it was like. I wish we had a curtain there," said Tilly. "I like to have our lights shine out in the evening, for the road is dark and lonely just here, and the twinkle of our lamp is pleasant to people as they pass by. We can do so little for our neighbors. I am glad we can at least cheer them on their way," said Tilly's mother. "Now put those poor old shoes to dry and go to bed, dearie. I'll be coming soon." Tilly went, taking her birdie with her to sleep in his basket near her bed, lest he should be lonely in the night. Soon the little house was dark and still. When Tilly came down and opened the front door that Christmas morning, she gave a loud cry, clapped her hands together, and then stood still, quite speechless with wonder and delight. There, near the stoop, lay a great pile of firewood all ready to be burned. There was also a large bundle and a basket with a lovely nosegay of winter roses, holly, and evergreen tied to the handle. "Oh, Mother, who could have left it?" cried Tilly, pale with excitement and the surprise of it all. She stepped out to bring in the basket, and her mother, a few steps behind, stooped down to scoop up the bundle. "The best and dearest of all Christmas angels is called Charity," Tilly's mother answered, her eyes welling with tears as she undid the bundle. "She walks abroad at Christmas time doing beautiful deeds like this and never staying to be thanked." It was all there, all that Tilly had imagined. There were warm, thick blankets, the comfortable shawl, a pair of new shoes, and best of all, a pretty winter hat for Bessie. The basket was full of good things to eat, and on the flowers lay a small note saying, "For the little girl who loves her neighbor as herself." "Mother, I really do think my little bird is an angel in disguise, and that all these splendid things came from him," said Tilly, laughing and crying with joy. It really did seem so. As Tilly spoke, the robin flew to the table, hopped to the nosegay, and perching among the roses, began to chirp with all his little might. The sun streamed in on the flowers, the tiny bird, and the happy child with her mother. No one saw a shadow glide across the window, or ever knew that Mr. King had seen and heard the little girls the night before. No one ever dreamed that the rich neighbor had learned a priceless lesson from his poor little neighbor girl. And Tilly's bird was a Christmas angel, for by the love and tenderness she gave to the helpless little creature, she brought good gifts to herself, happiness to an unknown benefactor, and the faithful friendship of a little friend who did not fly away, but stayed with her until the snow was gone, making summer for her in the winter time. What love can do? The small room had nothing in it but a bed, 2 chairs, and a big chest. A few little gowns hung on the wall, and the only picture was the wintry sky, sparkling with stars, framed by the uncurtained window. But the moon, pausing to peep, saw something touching and heard something pleasant. 2 heads in little, round nightcaps lay on one pillow, 2 pairs of wide-awake blue eyes stared up at the light, and 2 tongues were going like bell clappers. "I'm so glad we finished our shirts in time. It seemed as though we never should, and I don't think 6 cents is half enough for a great red flannel shirt with 4 buttonholes, do you?" said one voice rather wearily. "No, but then we each made 4, and 50 cents is a good deal of money. Are you sorry we didn't keep our quarters for ourselves?" asked the other voice with an undertone of regret. "Yes, I am, till I think how pleased the children will be with our tree, for they don't expect anything at all and will be so surprised. I wish we had more toys to put on it, for it looks so small and mean with only 3 or 4 things hanging from it. Oh, it won't hold any more, so I wouldn't worry about it. The toys are very red and yellow, And I guess the babies won't know how cheap they are but like them as much as if they cost heaps of money." With that brave, cheery reply, the 4 blue eyes turned toward the chest under the window, and the kind moon did her best to light up the tiny tree standing there. A very pitiful little tree. It was only a branch of hemlock in an old flower pot propped up with bits of coal, and hung with a few penny toys earned by the patient fingers of the elder sisters that the younger ones should not be disappointed. But in spite of the magical moonlight, the broken branch, with its scanty supply of fruit, looked pathetically poor, and one pair of eyes filled slowly with tears, while the other pair lost their happy look as if a cloud had covered the moonbeams. "Are you crying, Dolly?" "Not much, Grace. What makes you sad, dear?" "I didn't know how poor we were till I saw the tree, and then I couldn't help it," sobbed the elder sister, for at 12 she already knew something of the cares of poverty and missed the happiness that seemed to vanish out of all their lives when father died. "It's dreadful. I never thought we'd have to earn our tree and only be able to get a broken branch after all, with nothing on it but 3 sticks of candy, 2 squeaking dogs, a red cow, and an ugly bird with 1 feather in its tail." Overcome by a sudden sense of destitution, Grace sobbed even more despairingly than Dolly. "Hush, dear. We must cry softly or Mother will hear and come up, and then we shall have to tell. You know we said we wouldn't mind not having any Christmas." She seemed so sorry about it. "I must cry, but I'll be quiet about it." So the 2 heads went under the pillow for a few minutes, and not a sound betrayed them as the sisters cried softly in one another's arms, lest Mother should discover that they were no longer careless children, but brave young creatures trying to bear their share of poverty cheerfully. When the shower was over, the faces came out shining like roses after rain, and the voices went on again as before. "Don't you wish there really was a Santa Claus who knew what we wanted and would come and put 2 silver $half in our stockings, so we could go to see Puss in Boots at the theater tomorrow afternoon?" "Yes, indeed. But we didn't hang up any stockings anyway, you know, because Mother had nothing to put in them. It does seem as if rich people might think of the poor now and then. Such small considerations would help us feel remembered, and it couldn't be much trouble to take 2 small girls to the play. I shall remember to do something when I'm rich, like Mr. Crome and Miss Kent. I shall go round every Christmas with a big basket of goodies and give all the poor children some. Perhaps if we sew ever so many flannel shirts, we may be rich by and by. I should give Mother a new bonnet first of all, for I heard Miss Kent say no lady would wear such a shabby one. Mrs. Smith said fine bonnets didn't make real ladies, though. I like her best, but I do want a locket like Miss Kent's. I should give Mother some new rain shoes, and then I should buy a white apron with frills like Miss Kent's and bring home nice bunches of grapes and good things to eat, as Mr. Crome does. I often smell them, but he never gives me any. He only says, 'Hullo, little chick,' and I'd rather have oranges any time. It will take us a long while to get rich, I'm afraid. It makes me tired to think of it. I guess we'd better go to sleep now, dear. Good night, Dolly. Good night, Grace." They kissed each other softly, a nestling sound followed, and presently the little sisters lay fast asleep cheek against cheek on the pillow wet with their tears, never dreaming of what was going to happen to them tomorrow. Now Miss Kent's room was next to theirs, and as she sat sewing she could hear the children's talk, for they had soon forgotten to whisper. At first she smiled, then she looked sober, and when the prattle ceased she said to herself, as she glanced about her pleasant chamber, "Poor little things! They think I'm rich and envy me when I'm only a lady's hat-maker earning my living. I ought to have taken more notice of them, for their mother does have a hard time, I fancy, but never complains. I'm sorry they heard what I said, and if I knew how to do it without offending her, I'd trim a nice bonnet for a Christmas gift, for their mother is a dear lady in spite of her poor clothes. Perhaps I can give the children something they want anyhow, and I will. The idea of those mites making a fortune out of shirts at 6 cents apiece. Miss Kent laughed at the innocent delusion but sympathized with her little neighbors, for she knew all about hard times. She had good wages now but spent them on herself, and liked to be considered fine rather than neat. Still, she was a good-hearted young woman, and what she had overheard set her to thinking soberly about what she might do. "If I hadn't spent all my money on my dress for the party tomorrow night, I'd give each of them $50. As I cannot, I'll hunt up the other things they wanted, for it's a shame they shouldn't have a bit of Christmas when they have tried so hard to please other little ones." As she spoke, she stirred about her room and soon had a white apron, an old carnelian heart on a fresh blue ribbon, and 2 papers of bonbons ready. As no stockings were hung up, she laid a clean towel on the floor before the door and spread forth the small gifts to look their best. Miss Kent was so busy that she did not hear a step come quietly upstairs, and Mr. Crome, the artist, peeped at her through the balusters, wondering what she was about. He soon saw and watched her with pleasure, thinking that she never looked prettier than now. Presently she caught him at it and hastened to explain, telling what she had heard and how she was trying to atone for her past neglect of these young neighbors. Then she said good night, and both went into their rooms, she to sleep happily, and he to meditate thoughtfully. His eye kept turning to some bundles that lay on his table, as if the story he had heard suggested how he might follow Miss Kent's example. I rather think he would not have disturbed himself if he had not heard the story told in such a soft voice, with a pair of bright eyes full of pity looking into his. For little girls were not particularly interesting to him, and he was usually too tired to notice the industrious creatures who toiled up and down stairs on various errands. He was busy himself, after all. Now that he knew something of their small troubles, he felt as if it would please Miss Kent and be a good joke to do his share of the pretty work she had begun. So presently he jumped up, and opening his parcels, took out 2 oranges and 2 bunches of grapes. Then he looked up 2 silver $50, and stealing into the hall, laid the fruit upon the towel and the money atop the oranges. This addition improved the display very much, and Mr. Crome was stealing back, well pleased, when his eye fell on Miss Kent's door, and he said to himself, "She too shall have a little surprise, for she is a dear, kind-hearted soul." In his room was a prettily painted plate, and this he filled with green and purple grapes, tucked a sentimental note underneath, and leaving it on her threshold, crept away as stealthily as a burglar. The house was very quiet when Mrs. Smith, the landlady, came to turn off the gas. "Well, upon my word, here's fine doings to be sure," she said when she saw the state of the upper hall. "Now I wouldn't have thought it of Miss Kent, she is such a giddy girl, nor of Mr. Crome, he is so busy with his own affairs. I meant to give those children each a cake tomorrow, they are such good little things. I'll run down and get them now, as my contribution to this fine display." Away trotted Mrs. Smith to her pantry and picked out a couple of tempting cakes, shaped like hearts and full of plums. There was a goodly array of pies on the shelves, and she took 2 of them, saying, as she climbed the stairs again, "They remembered the children, so I'll remember them and have my share of the fun." So up went the pies, for Mrs. Smith had not much to give, and her spirit was generous, though her pastry was not of the best. It looked very droll to see pies sitting about on the thresholds of closed doors, but the cakes were quite elegant and filled up the corners of the towel handsomely, for the apron lay in the middle, with oranges right and left, like 2 sentinels in orange uniform. It was very late when the flicker of a candle came upstairs, and a pale lady, with a sweet, sad face, appeared, bringing a pair of red and a pair of blue mittens for her Dolly and Grace. Poor Mrs. Blake did have a hard time, for she stood all day in a great store that she might earn bread for the poor children who stayed at home and took care of one another. Her heart was heavy that night, because it was the first Christmas she had ever known without gifts and festivity of some sort. But Petkin, the youngest child, had been ill. Times were hard. The little mouths gaped for food like the bills of hungry birds, and there was no tender mate to help fill them. The angels hovering about the dingy hall just then must have seen the mother's tired face brighten beautifully when she discovered the gifts, and found that her little helpers had been so kindly remembered. Something more brilliant than the mock diamonds in Miss Kent's best earrings fell and glittered on the dusty floor, as Mrs. Blake added the mittens to the other things, and went to her lonely room again, smiling as she thought how she could thank all the contributors in a pleasant and simple way. Her windows were full of flowers, for the delicate tastes of the poor lady found great comfort in their beauty. "I have nothing else to give, and these will show how grateful I am," she said as she rejoiced that the scarlet geraniums were so full of gay clusters. The white chrysanthemum stars were all out, and the pink roses at their loveliest. The flowers slept now, dreaming of a sunny morrow as they sat safely sheltered from the bitter cold. But that night was their last, for a gentle hand cut them all, and soon 3 pretty nosegays stood in a glass, waiting for dawn, to be laid at 3 doors, with a few grateful words which would surprise and delight the receivers, for flowers were rare in those hard-working lives, and kind deeds often come back to the givers in fairer shapes than they go. Now one would think that there had been gifts enough, and no more could possibly arrive, since all had added his or her mite except Betsy, the maid, who was off on a holiday, and the babies fast asleep in their trundle bed with nothing to give but love and kisses. Nobody dreamed that the old cat would take it into her head that her kittens were in danger, because Mrs. Smith had said she thought they were nearly old enough to be given away. But the cat must have understood, for when all was dark and still, the anxious mother went padding upstairs to the children's door, meaning to hide her babies under their bed, sure they would be saved destruction. Mrs. Blake had shut the door, however, so poor Puss was disappointed, but finding a soft, clean spot among a variety of curious articles, she laid her kits there and kept them warm all night, with her head pillowed on the blue mittens. In the cold morning Dolly and Grace got up and scrambled into their clothes, not with joyful haste to see what their stockings held, for they had none, but because they had the little ones to dress while Mother got the breakfast. Dolly opened the door and started back with a cry of astonishment at the lovely spectacle before her. The other people had taken in their gifts, so nothing destroyed the magnificent effect of the treasures so curiously collected in the night. Puss had left her kits asleep and gone down to get her own breakfast, and there, in the middle of the ruffled apron, as if in a dainty cradle, lay the 2 Maltese darlings, with white bibs and boots on, and white tips to the tiny tails curled round their little noses. Grace and Dolly could only clasp their hands and look in rapturous silence for a minute. Then they went down on their knees and reveled in the unexpected richness before them. "I do believe angels must have heard us, for here is everything we wanted," said Dolly, holding the carnelian heart in one hand and the plumy one in the other. "How can we ever explain this? For we didn't mention kittens, but we wanted one, and here are 2 darlings," cried Grace, almost purring with delight as the downy bunches unrolled and gaped till their bits of pink tongues were visible. "Mrs. Smith must have been one angel, I guess, and Miss Kent was another, for that is her apron. I shouldn't wonder if Mr. Crome gave us the oranges and the money. Men always have lots, and his name is on this bit of paper," said Dolly. "Oh, I'm so glad. Now we shall have a Christmas like other people, and I'll never say again that rich folks don't remember poor folks. Come and show all our treasures to Mother and the babies. They must have some," answered Grace, feeling that the world was all right and life not half as hard as she thought it last night. Shrieks of delight greeted the sisters, and all that morning there was joy and feasting in Mrs. Blake's room, and in the afternoon Dolly and Grace went to the theater and actually saw Puss in Boots, for their mother insisted on their going, having discovered how the hard-earned quarters had been spent. This was such unhoped-for bliss they could hardly believe it, and kept smiling at one another so brightly that people wondered who the happy girls in the shabby cloaks could be, who clapped their new mittens so heartily and laughed till it was better than music to hear them. This was a remarkable Christmas day, and they long remembered it. For while they were absorbed in the fortunes of the Marquis of Carabas and the funny cat, who tucked his tail in his belt, washed his face so awkwardly, and didn't know how to purr, strange things were happening at home, and more surprises were in store for Dolly and Grace. You see, when people once begin to do kindnesses, it is so easy and pleasant, they find it hard to leave off, and sometimes it beautifies them so that they find they love one another very much, as Mr. Crome and Miss Kent discovered that wondrous day. They were very jolly at dinner and talked a good deal about the Blakes, who ate in their own rooms. Miss Kent told what the children said, and it touched the soft spot in all their hearts to hear about the red shirts, though they laughed at Grace's lament over the bird with only one feather in its tail. "I'd give them a better tree if I had any place to put it and knew how to trim it up," said Mr. Crome, with a sudden burst of generosity, which so pleased Miss Kent that her eyes shone like Christmas candles. "Put it in the back parlor. All the Browns are away for a week, and we'll help you trim it, won't we, my dear?" cried Mrs. Smith warmly, for she saw that he was in a sociable mood and thought it a pity the Blakes should not profit by it. "Yes, indeed, I should like it of all things, and it needn't cost much, for I have some skill in trimming, as you know." And Miss Kent looked so gay and pretty as she spoke that Mr. Crome made up his mind that millinery must be a delightful occupation. "Come on then, ladies, and we'll have a little fun. I'm a lonely old bachelor with nowhere to go today, and I'd like to be in good company and have a good time." They had it, I assure you, for they all fell to work as busy as bees, flying and buzzing about with much laughter as they worked their pleasant miracle. Mr. Crome acted more like a father of a large family than a crusty bachelor. Miss Kent's skillful fingers flew as they never did before, and Mrs. Smith trotted up and down as briskly as if she were 16 instead of being a stout, elderly woman of 70. The children were so full of the play and telling about it that they forgot their tree till after supper, but when they went to look for it, they found it gone, and in its place a great paper hand with one finger pointing downstairs, and on it these mysterious words in red: "Look in the Browns' back parlor." At the door of that interesting apartment they found their mother with Will and Petkin, for another hand had suddenly appeared to them pointing up. The door flew open quite as if it were a fairy play, and they went in to find a pretty tree planted in a red box on the center table, lighted with candles, hung with gilded nuts, red apples, gay bonbons, and a gift for each child. Mr. Crome was hidden behind one folding door, and stout Mrs. Smith squeezed behind the other, and they both thought it a great improvement upon an old-fashioned Santa Claus to have Miss Kent, in her new white dress, with Mrs. Blake's roses in her hair, step forward as the children gazed in silent rapture, and with a few sweet words welcome them to surprises their friends had made. There were many Christmas trees in the city that night, but none that gave such hearty pleasures as the one which so magically took the place of the broken branch and its few poor toys. They were all there, however, and Dolly and Grace were immensely pleased to see that, of all their gifts, Petkin chose the forlorn bird to carry to bed with her, the one yellow feather being just to her taste. Mrs. Blake put on her neat bonnet, and was so gratified that Miss Kent thought it the most successful one she ever trimmed. She was well paid for it by the thanks of one neighbor and the admiration of another, for when she went to her party, Mr. Crome went with her and said something on the way which made her heart dance more lightly than her feet that night. Good Mrs. Smith felt that her house had covered itself with glory by this event, and Dolly and Grace declared that it was the most perfect and delightful surprise party ever seen. It was all over by 9 o'clock, and with good-night kisses for everyone, the little girls climbed up to bed laden with treasures and too happy for many words. But as they tied their round caps, Dolly said, thoughtfully, "On the whole, I think it's rather nice to be poor when people are kind to you." "Well, I'd rather be rich, but if I can't be, it is very good fun to have Christmas trees like this one," answered Grace truthfully, never guessing that they had planted the seed from which the little pine tree grew so quickly and beautifully. When the moon came to look in at the window on her nightly round, two smiling faces lay on the pillow, which was no longer wet with tears, but rather knobby with the mine of riches hidden underneath first-fruits of the neighborly friendship which flourished in that house until another and a merrier Christmas came. Rosa's tale. Now, I believe everyone has had a Christmas present and a good time. "Nobody has been forgotten, not even the cat," said Mrs. Ward to her daughter, as she looked at Pabelinda, purring on the rug, with a new ribbon round her neck and the remains of a chicken bone between her paws. It was very late, for the Christmas tree was decorated, the little folks in bed, the baskets and bundles left at poor neighbors' doors, and everything ready for the happy day which would begin as the clock struck 12. They were resting after their mother's words reminded Belinda of one good friend who had received no gift that night. "We've forgotten Rosa. Her mistress is away, but she shall have a present nevertheless. As late as it is, I know she would like some apples and cake and a Merry Christmas from the family." Belinda jumped up as she spoke, and having collected such remnants of the feast as a horse would relish, she put on her hood, lighted a lantern, and trotted off to the barn to deliver her Christmas cheer. As she opened the door of the loose box in which Rosa was kept, Belinda saw Rosa's eyes shining in the dark as she lifted her head with a startled air. Then, recognizing a friend, the horse rose and came rustling through the straw to greet her late visitor. She was evidently much pleased with the attention and gratefully rubbed her nose against Miss Belinda. At the same time, she poked her nose suspiciously into the contents of the basket. Miss Belinda well knew that Rosa was an unusually social beast and would enjoy the little feast more if she had company, so she hung up the lantern and, sitting down on an inverted bucket, watched her as she munched contentedly. "Now really," said Miss Belinda, when telling her story afterwards, "I am not sure whether I took a nap and dreamed what follows, or whether it actually happened, for strange things do occur at Christmas time, as everyone knows. As I sat there, the town clock struck 12, and the sound reminded me of the legend, which affirms that all dumb animals are endowed with speech for 1 hour after midnight on Christmas Eve, in memory of the animals who lingered near the manger when the blessed Christ child was born. I wish this pretty legend were true and our Rosa could speak, if only for an hour. I'm sure she has an interesting history, and I long to know all about it." I said this aloud, and to my utter amazement the bay mare stopped eating, fixed her intelligent eyes upon my face, and answered in a language I understood perfectly well, "You shall indeed know my history, for whether the legend you mention is true or not, I do feel that I can confide in you and tell you all that I feel," sweet Rosa told me. I was lying awake listening to the fun in the house, thinking of my dear mistress so far away across the ocean and feeling very sad, for I heard you say that I was to be sold. That nearly broke my heart, for no one has ever been so kind to me as Miss Mary, and nowhere shall I be taken care of, nursed, and loved as I have been since she bought me. I know I'm getting old and stiff in the knees. My forefoot is lame, and sometimes I'm cross when my shoulder aches, but I do try to be a patient, grateful beast. I've gotten fat with good living, my work is not hard, and I dearly love to carry those who have done so much for me. I'll carry them about until I die in the harness if they will only keep me." I was so astonished by Rosa's speech that I tumbled off the pail on which I was sitting, and landed in the straw staring up at Rosa, as dumb as if I had lost the power she had gained. She seemed to enjoy my surprise, and added to it by letting me hear a genuine horse laugh hearty, shrill, and clear, as she shook her pretty head, and went on talking rapidly in the language which I now perceived to be a mixture of English and the peculiar dialect of the horse country. "Thank you for remembering me tonight, and in return for the goodies you bring I'll tell my story as quickly as I can, for I have often longed to recount the trials and triumphs of my life. Miss Mary came last Christmas Eve to bring me sugar, and I wanted to speak, but it was too early and I could not say a word, though my heart was full." Rosa paused an instant, and her fine eyes dimmed as if with tender tears at the recollection of the happy year, which followed the day she was bought from the drudgery of a livery stable to be a lady's special pet. I stroked her neck as she stooped to sniff affectionately at my hood, and eagerly said, "Tell away, dear. I'm full of interest and understand every word you say." Thus encouraged, Rosa threw up her head and began once again to speak with an air of pride, which plainly proved what we had always suspected, that she belonged to a good family. "My father was a famous racer, and I am very like him, the same color, spirit, and grace, and but for the cruelty of man I might have been as renowned as he. I was a happy colt, petted by my master, tamed by love, and never struck a blow while he lived. I won one race for him, and my future seemed so promising that when he died, I brought a great price. I mourned the death of my master, but I was glad to be sent to my new owner's racing stable, where I was made over by everyone. I heard many predictions that I would be another Goldsmith Maid or Flora Temple. Ah, how ambitious and proud I was in those days! I was truly vain in regard to my good blood, my speed, and my beauty, for indeed I was handsome then, though you may find it difficult to believe now." Rosa sighed regretfully as she stole a look at me, and turned her head in a way that accentuated the fine lines about her head and neck. "I do not find it hard to believe at all," I answered. "Miss Mary saw them, though you seemed to be nothing more than a skeleton when she bought you. The Cornish blacksmith who shod you noted the same. It is easy to see that you belong to a good family by the way you hold your head without a checkring and carry your tail like a plume," I said, with a look of admiration. I must hurry over this part of my story because, though brilliant, it was very brief, and ended in a way that made it the bitterest portion of my life, continued Rosa. "I won several races, and everyone predicted that I would earn great fame. You may guess how high my reputation was when I tell you that before my last, fatal trial, thousands were bet on me, and my rival trembled at the thought of racing against me. I was full of spirit, eager to show my speed and sure of success. Alas, how little I knew of the wickedness of human nature then, how dearly I bought the knowledge, and how completely it has changed my whole life. You do not know much about such matters, of course, and I won't digress to tell you all the tricks of the trade. Only beware of jockeys and never bet. I was kept carefully out of everyone's way for weeks and only taken out for exercise by my trainer. Poor Bill! I was fond of him, and he was so good to me that I never have forgotten him, though he broke his neck years ago. A few nights before the great race, as I was enjoying a good sleep carefully tucked away in my stall, someone stole in and gave me a dish of warm mash. It was dark, and I was but half awake. I ate it like a fool, even though I knew by instinct that it was not Bill who left it for me. I was a trusting creature then, and used to all sorts of strange things being done to prepare me to race. For that reason, I never suspected that something could be wrong. Something was very wrong, however, and the deceit of it has caused me to be suspicious of any food ever since. You see, the mash was dosed in some way. It made me very ill and nearly allowed my enemies to triumph. What a shameful, cowardly trick! Bill worked with me day and night, trying desperately to prepare me to run. I did my best to seem well, but there was not time for me to regain my lost strength and spirit. My pride was the only thing that kept me going. "I'll win for my master, even if I die in doing it," I said to myself. When the hour came, I pranced to my place trying to look as well as ever, though my heart was heavy and I trembled with excitement. "Courage, my lass, and we'll beat them in spite of their dark tricks," Bill whispered, as he sprang into place. I lost the first heat but won the second, and the sound of the cheering gave me strength to walk away without staggering, though my legs shook under me. What a splendid minute that was when, encouraged and refreshed by my faithful Bill, I came on the track again. I knew my enemies began to fear. I carried myself so bravely that they fancied I was quite well, and now, excited by that first success, I was mad with impatience to be off and cover myself with glory. Rosa looked as if her splendid moment had come again, for she arched her neck, opened wide her red nostrils, and pawed the straw with one little foot. At the same time, her eyes shone with sudden fire, and her ears were pricked up as if to catch again the shouts of the spectators on that long-ago day. "I wish I had been there to see you," I exclaimed, quite carried away by her ardor. "I wish you had indeed," she answered, "for I won. I won. The big black horse did his best, but I had vowed to win or die, and I kept my word. For I beat him by a head, and as quickly as I had done so, I fell to the ground as if dead. I might as well have died then and there. I heard those around me whispering that the poison, the exercise, and the fall had ruined me as a racer. My master no longer cared for me and would have had me shot if kind Bill had not saved my life. I was pronounced good for nothing, and Bill was able to buy me cheaply. For quite a long time, I was lame and useless, but his patient care did wonders. And just as I was able to be of use to him, he was killed. A gentleman in search of a saddle horse purchased me because my easy gait and quiet temper suited him, for I was meek enough now, and my size allowed me to carry his delicate daughter. For more than a year, I served little Miss Alice, rejoicing to see how rosy her pale cheeks became, how upright her feeble figure grew, thanks to the hours she spent with me. My canter rocked her as gently as if she were in a cradle, and fresh air was the medicine she needed. She often said she owed her life to me, and I liked to think so, for she made my life a very easy one. But somehow my good times never lasted long, and when Miss Alice went west, I was sold. I had been so well treated that I looked as handsome and happy as ever. To be honest, though, my shoulder never was strong again, and I often had despondent moods, longing for the excitement of the race track with the instinct of my kind. So I was glad when, attracted by my spirit and beauty, a young army officer bought me, and I went to the war. Ah, you never guessed that, did you? Yes, I did my part gallantly and saved my master's life more than once. You have observed how martial music delights me, but you don't know that it is because it reminds me of the proudest hour of my life. I've told you about the saddest, now listen as I tell you about the bravest, and give me a pat for the courageous act that won my master his promotion, though I got no praise for my part of the achievement. In one of the hottest battles, my captain was ordered to lead his men on a most perilous mission. They hesitated, so did he, for it was certain to cost many lives, and brave as they were, they paused an instant. But I settled the point. Wild with the sound of drums, the smell of powder, and the excitement of the hour, I rebelled. Though I was sharply reined in, I took the bit between my teeth and dashed straight ahead into the midst of the fight. Though he tried, my rider could do nothing to stop me. The men, thinking their captain was leading them on, followed cheering loudly and carrying all that was before them. What happened just after that I never could remember, except that I got a wound here in my neck and a cut on my flank. The scar is there still, and I'm proud of it, though buyers always consider it a blemish. When the battle was won, my master was promoted on the field, and I carried him up to the general as he sat among his officers under the torn flags. Both of us were weary and wounded. Both of us were full of pride at what we had done, but he received all the praise and honor. I received only a careless word and a better supper than usual. It seemed so wrong that no one knew or appreciated my courageous action. Not a one seemed to care that it was the horse, not the man, who led that fearless charge. I did think I deserved at least a rosette. Others received much more for far less dangerous deeds. My master alone knew the truth of the matter. He thanked me for my help by keeping me always with him until the sad day when he was killed in a skirmish and lay for hours with no one to watch and mourn over him but his faithful horse. Then I knew how much he loved and thanked me. His hand stroked me while it had the strength. His eye turned to me until it grew too dim to see, and when help came at last, I heard him whisper to a comrade, "Be kind to Rosa and send her safely home. She has earned her rest." I had earned it, but I did not get it. When I arrived home, I was received by a mother whose heart was broken by the loss of her son. She did not live long to cherish me. The worst of my bad times were only beginning. My next owner was a fast young man who treated me badly in many ways. At last the spirit of my father rose within me, and I ran away with my master and caused him to take a brutal fall. To tame me down, I was sold as a carriage horse. That almost killed me, for it was dreadful drudgery. Day after day, I pulled heavy loads behind me over the hard pavement. The horses that pulled alongside me were far from friendly, and there was no affection to cheer my life. I have often longed to ask why Mr. Berg does not try to prevent such crowds from piling into those carriages. Now I beg you to do what you can to stop such an unmerciful abuse. In snowstorms it was awful, and more than one of my mates dropped dead with overwork and discouragement. I used to wish I could do the same, for my poor feet, badly shod, became so lame I could hardly walk at times, and the constant strain on the upgrades brought back the old trouble in my shoulder worse than ever. Why they did not kill me, I don't know. I was a miserable creature then, but there must be something attractive that lingers about me, for people always seem to think I am worth saving. Whatever can it be, ma'am? Now, Rosa, don't talk so. You know you are an engaging little animal, and if you live to be 40, I'm sure you will still have certain pretty ways about you, ways that win the hearts of women, if not of men. Women sympathize with your afflictions, find themselves amused with your coquettish airs, and like your affectionate nature. Men, unfortunately, see your weak points and take a money view of the case. Now hurry up and finish. It's getting a bit cold out here. I laughed as I spoke, and Rosa eyed me with a sidelong glance and gently waved her docked tail, which was her delight. The sly thing liked to be flattered and was as fond of compliments as a girl. Many thanks. I will come now to the most interesting portion of my narrative. As I was saying, instead of being knocked on the head, I was packed off to New Hampshire and had a fine rest among the green hills, with a dozen or so weary friends. It was during this holiday that I acquired the love of nature Miss Mary detected and liked in me when she found me ready to study sunsets with her, to admire new landscapes and enjoy bright summer weather. In the autumn, a livery stable keeper bought me, and through the winter he fed me well. By spring, I was quite presentable. It was a small town, but a popular place to visit in the summer time. I was kept on the trot while the season lasted, mostly because ladies found me easy to drive. You, Miss Belinda, were one of the ladies, and I never shall forget, though I have long ago forgiven it, how you laughed at my odd gait the day you hired me. My tender feet and stiff knees made me tread very gingerly, and amble along with short, mincing steps, which contrasted rather strangely with my proudly waving tail and high-carried head. You liked me nevertheless because I didn't rattle you senseless as we traveled down the steep hills. You also seemed pleased that I didn't startle at the sight of locomotives and stood patiently while you gathered flowers and enjoyed the sights and sounds. I have always felt a regard for you because You did not whip me and admired my eyes, which, I may say without vanity, have always been considered unusually fine. But no one ever won my whole heart like Miss Mary, and I never shall forget the happy day when she came to the stable to order a saddle horse. Her cheery voice caught my attention, and when she said after looking at several showy beasts, "No, they don't suit me. This little one here has the right air," my heart danced within me and I looked round with a whinny of delight. "Can I ride her?" she asked, understanding my welcome. She came right up to me, patted me, peered into my face, rubbed my nose, and looked at my feet with an air of interest and sympathy that made me feel as if I'd like to carry her clear around the world. Ah, what rides we had after that! What happy hours trotting merrily through the green woods, galloping over the breezy hills, and pacing slowly along quiet lanes, where I often lunched luxuriously on clover tops while Miss Mary took a sketch of some picturesque scene with me in the foreground. I liked that very much. We had long chats at such times, and I was convinced that she understood me perfectly. She was never frightened when I danced for pleasure on the soft turf. She never chided me when I snatched a bite from the young trees as we passed through sylvan ways, never thought it any trouble to let me wet my tired feet in babbling brooks, and always kindly dismounted long enough to remove the stones that plagued me. Then how well she rode! So firm yet light in the seat, so steady a hand on the reins, so agile a foot to spring on and off, and such infectious spirits. No matter how despondent or cross I might be, I felt happy and young again whenever dear Miss Mary was on my back. Here Rosa gave a frisk that sent the straw flying and made me shrink into a corner. She pranced about the box, neighing so loudly that she woke the big, brown colt in the next stall and set poor Buttercup to lowing for her lost calf, which she had managed to forget about for a few moments in sleep. Ah, Miss Mary never ran away from me. She knew my heels were to be trusted, and she let me play as I would, glad to see me lively. "Never mind, Miss Belinda, come out and I'll behave as befits my years," laughed Rosa, composing herself, and adding in a way so like a woman that I could not help smiling in the dark, "When I say years, I beg you to understand that I am not as old as that base man declared, but just in the prime of life for a horse. Hard usage has made me seem old before my time, but I am good for years of service yet. Few people have been through as much as you have, Rosa, and you certainly have earned the right to rest," I said consolingly, for her little whims and vanities amused me. "You know what happened next," she continued, "but I must seize this opportunity to express my thanks for all the kindness I've received since Miss Mary bought me, in spite of the ridicule and dissuasion of all her friends. I know I didn't look a good bargain. I was very thin and lame and shabby, but she saw and loved the willing spirit in me. She pitied my hard lot and felt that it would be a good deed to buy me even if she never got much work out of me. I shall always remember that, and whatever happens to me hereafter, I never shall be as proud again as I was the day she put my new saddle and bridle on me. I was led out, sleek, plump, and handsome, with blue rosettes at my ears, my tail cut in the English style, and on my back Miss Mary sat in her London hat and habit, all ready to head a cavalcade of 18 horsemen and horsewomen. We were the most perfect pair of all, and when the troop pranced down the street 6 abreast, my head was the highest, my rider the straightest, and our 2 hearts the friendliest in all the goodly company. Nor is it pride and love alone that bind me to her. It is gratitude as well. She often bathed my feet herself, rubbed me down, watered me, blanketed me, and came daily to see me when I was here alone for weeks in the winter. Didn't she write to the famous friend of my race for advice, and drive me 7 miles to get a good smith to shoe me well? Didn't she give me weeks of rest without shoes in order to save my poor, contracted feet? And am I not now fat and handsome, and barring the stiff knees, a very presentable horse? If I am, it is all owing to Miss Mary, and for that reason, I want to live and die in her service. She doesn't want to sell me and only told you to do so because you didn't want to care for me while she is gone. Dear Miss Belinda, please keep me. I'll eat as little as I can. I won't ask for a new blanket, though this old army one is thin and shabby. I'll trot for you all winter and try not to show it if I am lame. I'll do anything a horse can, no matter how humble, in order to earn my living. Don't, I beg you, send me away among strangers who have neither interest nor pity for me." Rosa had spoken rapidly, feeling that her plea must be made now or never. Before another Christmas, she might be far away and speech of no use to win her wish. I was greatly touched, even though she was only a horse. She was looking earnestly at me as she spoke, and made the last words very eloquent by preparing to bend her stiff knees and lie down at my feet. I stopped her and answered with an arm about her neck and her soft nose in my hand. "You shall not be sold, Rosa. You shall go and board at Mr. Towns's great stable, where you will have pleasant society among the 80 horses who usually pass the winter there. Your shoes shall be taken off so that you might rest until March at least. Your care will be only the best, my dear, and I will come and see you. In the spring you shall return to us, even if Miss Mary is not here to welcome you. Thanks, many, many thanks, but I wish I could do something to earn my board. I hate to be idle, though rest is delicious. Is there nothing I can do to repay you, Miss Belinda? Please answer quickly." "I know the hour is almost over," cried Rosa, stamping with anxiety. Like all horses, she wanted the last word. "Yes, you can," I cried, as a sudden idea popped into my head. "I'll write down what you have told me and send the little story to a certain paper I know of. The money I get for it will pay your board. So rest in peace, my dear. You will have earned your living after all, and you may rest knowing that your debt is paid." Before she could reply, the clock struck 1. A long sigh of satisfaction was all the response in her power. But we understood each other now, and cutting a lock from her hair for Miss Mary, I gave Rosa a farewell caress and went on my way. I couldn't help wondering if I had made it all up or the charming beast had really broken a year's silence and freed her mind. However that may be, here is the tale. The sequel to it is that the bay mare has really gone to board at a first-class stable, concluded Miss Belinda. I call occasionally and leave my card in the shape of an apple, finding Madame Rosa living like an independent lady, her large box and private yard on the sunny side of the barn, a kind ostler to wait upon her, and much genteel society from the city when she is inclined for company. What more could any reasonable horse desire? Mrs. Podger's teapot, ah, dear me, I'm a deal too comfortable. Judging from appearances, Mrs. Podgers certainly had some cause for that unusual exclamation. To begin with, the room was comfortable. It was tidy, bright and warm, full of cozy corners and capital contrivances for quiet enjoyment. The chairs seemed to extend their plump arms invitingly. The old-fashioned sofa was so hospitable that whoever sat down upon it was slow to get up. The pictures, though portraits, did not stare one out of countenance but surveyed the scene with an air of tranquil enjoyment, and the unshuttered windows allowed the cheery light to shine out into the snowy street through blooming screens of Christmas roses and white chrysanthemums. The fire was comfortable, for it was neither hidden in a stove nor imprisoned behind bars, but went rollicking up the wide chimney with a jovial roar. It flickered over the supper table as if curious to discover what savory foods were concealed under the shining covers. It touched up the old portraits till they seemed to wink. It covered the walls with comical shadows, as if the portly chairs had set their arms akimbo and were dancing a jig. The fire flashed out into the street with a voiceless greeting to every passer-by. It kindled mimic fires in the brass andirons and the teapot simmering on the hob, and best of all, it shone its brightest on Mrs. Podgers, as if conscious that it couldn't do a better thing. Mrs. Podgers was comfortable as she sat there, buxom, blooming and brisk, in spite of her 40 years and her widow's cap. Her black gown was illuminated to such an extent that it couldn't look somber. Her cap had given up trying to be prim long ago, and cherry ribbons wouldn't have made it more becoming as it set off her crisp, black hair and met in a coquettish bow under her plump chin. Her white apron encircled her trim waist, as if conscious of its advantages, and the mourning pin upon her bosom actually seemed to twinkle with satisfaction at the enviable post it occupied. The sleek cat, purring on the hearth, was comfortable. So was the agreeable fragrance of muffins that pervaded the air. So was the drowsy tick of the clock in the corner. And if anything was needed to give a finishing touch to the general comfort of the scene, the figure pausing in the doorway supplied the want most successfully. Heroes are always expected to be young and comely, also fierce, melancholy, or at least what novel readers call interesting. But I am forced to own that Mrs. Podger was none of these. Half the real beauty, virtue, and romance of the world gets put into humble souls, hidden in plain bodies. Mr. Jerusalem Turner was an example of this, and at the risk of shocking sentimental readers, I must frankly state that he was 50, stout and bald, also that he used bad grammar, had a double chin, and was only the clerk in a prosperous grocery store. A hale and hearty old gentleman with cheerful brown eyes, a ruddy countenance and curly gray hair sticking up all round his head, he had an air of energy and independence that was pleasant to behold. There he stood, beaming upon the unconscious Mrs. Podgers, softly rubbing his hands and smiling to himself with the air of a man enjoying the chief satisfaction of his life as he was. "Ah, dear me, I'm a deal too comfortable," sighed Mrs. Podgers, addressing the teapot. "Not a bit, mum, not a bit." In walked the gentleman, and up rose the lady, saying with a start and an aspect of relief, "Bless me, I didn't hear you. I began to think you were never coming to your tea, Mr. Jerusalem." Everybody called him Mr. Jerusalem, and many people were ignorant that he had any other name. He liked it, for it began with the children, and the little voices had endeared it to him, not to mention the sound of it from Mrs. Podger's lips for 10 years. "I know I'm late, mum, but I really couldn't help it. Tonight's a busy time, and the lads are just good for nothing with their jokes and spirits, so I stayed to steady 'em and do a little job that turned up unexpected." "Sit right down and have your tea while you can, then. I've kept it warm for you, and the muffins are done lovely." Mrs. Podgers bustled about with an alacrity that seemed to give an added relish to the supper, and when her companion was served, she sat smiling at him with her hand on the teapot, ready to replenish his cup before he could ask for it. "Have things been fretting of you, mum? You looked downhearted as I came in, and that ain't accordin' to the time of year, which is merry," said Mr. Jerusalem, stirring his tea with a sense of solid satisfaction that would have sweetened a far less palatable draught. "It's the teapot. I don't know what's got into it tonight, but, as I was waiting for you, it set me thinking of one thing and another, till I declare I felt as if it had up and spoke to me, showing me how I wasn't grateful enough for my blessings, but a deal more comfortable than I deserved." While speaking, Mrs. Podger's eyes rested on an inscription that encircled the corpulent little silver pot. "To our benefactor they who give to the poor lend to the Lord." Now one wouldn't think there was anything in the speech or the inscription to disturb Mr. Jerusalem, but there seemed to be, for he fidgeted in his chair, dropped his fork, and glanced at the teapot with a very odd expression. It was a capital little teapot, solid, bright as hands could make it, and ornamented with a robust young cherub perched upon the lid, regardless of the warmth of his seat. With her eyes still fixed upon it, Mrs. Podgers continued meditatively, "You know how fond I am of the teapot for poor Podger's sake. I really feel quite superstitious about it, and when thoughts come to me as I sit watching it, I have faith in them because they always remind me of the past." Here, after vain efforts to restrain himself, Mr. Rusilum broke into a sudden laugh, so hearty and infectious that Mrs. Podgers couldn't help smiling, even while she shook her head at him. "I beg pardon, Mum. It's hysterical. I'll never do it again," panted Mr. Rusilum, as he got his breath and went soberly on with his supper. It was a singular fact that whenever the teapot was particularly alluded to, he always behaved in this incomprehensible manner, laughed, begged pardon, said it was hysterical, and promised never to do it again. It used to trouble Mrs. Podgers very much, but she had grown used to it, and having been obliged to overlook many oddities in the departed Podgers, she easily forgave Rusilum his only one. After the laugh there was a pause, during which Mrs. Podgers sat absently polishing up the silver cherub, with the memory of the little son who died 2 Christmases ago lying heavy at her heart, and Mr. Rusilum seemed to be turning something over in his mind as he watched a bit of butter sink luxuriously into the warm bosom of a muffin. Once or twice he paused as if listening. Several times he stole a look at Mrs. Podgers and presently said, in a somewhat anxious tone, "You was saying just now that you was a deal too comfortable in order to realize your blessings." "Yes, I should. I'm getting lazy, selfish, and forgetful of other folks. You leave me nothing to do and make everything so easy for me that I'm growing young and giddy again. Now that isn't as it should be, Rusilum. It meets my views exactly, Mum. You've had your hard times, your worriments and cares, and now it's right to take your rest. Then why don't you take yours? I'm sure you've earned it drudging 30 years in the store with more extra work than holidays for your share." "Oh well, Mum, it's different with me, you know. Business is amusing, and I'm so used to it I shouldn't know myself if I was out of the store for good." "Well, I hope you are saving up something against the time when business won't be amusing." "You are so generous. I'm afraid you forget you can't work for other people all your days." "Yes, Mum. I've put a little sum in a safe bank that pays good interest, and when I'm past work, I'll fall back and enjoy it." To judge from the cheerful content of the old gentleman's face, he was enjoying it already, and he looked about him with the air of a man who had made a capital investment, and was in the receipt of generous dividends. Seeing Mrs. Podgers' bright eye fixed upon him, as if she suspected something and would have the truth out of him in 2 minutes, he recalled the conversation to the point from which it had wandered. "If you would like to try how a little misery suits you, Mum, I can accommodate you if you'll step upstairs." "Good gracious, what do you mean? Who's up there? Why didn't you tell me before?" cried Mrs. Podgers in a flutter of interest, curiosity, and surprise, as he knew she would be. "You see, Mum, I was doubtful how you'd like it. I did it without stopping to think, and then I was afraid you'd consider it a liberty." Mr. Rusilum spoke with some hesitation, but Mrs. Podgers didn't wait to hear him, for she was already at the door, lamp in hand, and would have been off had she known where to go, upstairs being a somewhat vague expression. The old gentleman led the way to the room he had occupied for 30 years, in spite of Mrs. Podgers' frequent offers of a better and brighter one. He was attached to it, small and dark as it was, for the joys and sorrows of more than half his life had come to him in that little room, and somehow, when he was there, it brightened up amazingly. Mrs. Podgers looked well about her but saw nothing new, and her conductor said, as he paused beside the bed, "Let me tell you how I found it before I show it. You see, Mum, I had to step down the street just at dark, and passing the windows I give a glance in, as I've a bad habit of doing when the lamps is lighted and you a setting there alone. Well, Mum, what did I see outside but a ragged little chap a-flattening his nose against the glass and staring in with all his eyes. I didn't blame him much for it, and on I goes without a word. When I came back, I see him a-lying close to the wall, and mistrusting that he was up to some game that might give you a scare, I speaks to him. Well, he don't answer. I touches him, he don't stir. Then I picks him up, and seeing that he's gone in a fit or a faint, I makes for the store with a will. He come to Rapid, and finding that he was most froze and starved, I fed and warmed and fixed him a trifle and then tucked him away here, for he's got no folks to worry for him and was too used up to go out again tonight. That's the story, Mum, and now I'll produce the little chap if I can find him." With that, Mr. Rusalem began to grope about the bed, chuckling, yet somewhat anxious, for not a vestige of an occupant appeared, till a dive downward produced a sudden agitation of the clothes, a squeak, and the unexpected appearance out at the foot of the bed of a singular figure that dodged into a corner with one arm up, as if to ward off a blow, while a sleepy little voice exclaimed beseechingly, I'm up, don't hit me." Lord love the child, who'd think of doing that? "Wake up, Joe, and see your friends," said Mr. Rusalem, advancing cautiously. At the sound of his voice, down went the arm, and Mrs. Podgers saw a boy of 9 or 10, arrayed in a flannel garment that evidently belonged to Mr. Rusalem, for though none too long, it was immensely broad, and the voluminous sleeves were pinned up, showing a pair of wasted arms, chapped with cold and mottled with bruises. A large blue sock still covered one foot, the other was bound up as if hurt. A tall cotton nightcap, garnished with a red tassel, looked like a big extinguisher on a small candle, and from under it a pair of dark, hollow eyes glanced sharply with a shrewd, suspicious look that made the little face more pathetic than the marks of suffering, neglect, and abuse, which told the child's story without words. As if quite reassured by Rusalem's presence, the boy shuffled out of his corner, saying coolly, as he prepared to climb into his nest again, "I thought it was the old one when you grabbed me. Ain't this bed a first-rater, though?" Mr. Rusalem lifted the composed young personage into the middle of the big bed, where he sat bolt upright, surveying the prospect from under the coverlet with an equanimity that quite took the good lady's breath away. But Mr. Rusalem fell back and pointed to him, saying, "There he is, Mum," with as much pride and satisfaction as if he had found some rare and valuable treasure, for the little child was very precious in his sight. Mrs. Podgers really didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and settled the matter by plumping down beside the boy, saying cordially as she took the grimy little hands into her own, "He's heartily welcome, Rusalem. Now tell me all about it, my poor dear, and don't be afraid." "Ho, I ain't afraid of you nor he. I ain't got nothing to tell, only my name's Joe and I'm sleepy." "Who is your mother and where do you live, dearie?" asked Mrs. Podgers, haunted with the idea that some woman must be anxious for the child. "Ain't got any. We don't have 'em where I lives. The old one takes care of me." "Who is the old one?" "Granny. I works for her and she lets me stay alonger her." "Bless the dear, what work can such a mite do?" "Heaps o' things. I sifts ashes, picks rags, goes beggin', runs errands, and sometimes the big fellers lets me sell papers. That's fun, only I gets knocked round and it hurts, you'd better believe. Did you come here begging and being afraid to ring, stand outside looking in at me enjoying myself, like a selfish creetur as I am? I forgot to ask for the cold vittles, lookin' at warm ones, and thinkin' if they was mine what I'd give the little fellers when I has my tree." "Your what, child?" "My Christmas tree. Look-a-here, I've got it and all these to put on it tomorrow." From under his pillow the boy produced a small branch of hemlock, dropped from some tree on its passage to a gayer festival than little Joe's. Also an old handkerchief which contained his treasures, only a few odds and ends picked up in the streets. A gnarly apple, half a dozen nuts, 2 or 3 dingy bonbons, gleaned from the sweepings of some store, and a bit of cheese, which last possession he evidently prized highly. "That's for the old one. She likes it, and I kep it for her 'cause she don't hit so hard when I fetch her goodies. You don't mind, do you?" he said, looking inquiringly at Mr. Rusalem, who blew his nose like a trumpet and patted the big nightcap with a fatherly gesture more satisfactory than words. "What have you kept for yourself, dear?" asked Mrs. Podgers, with an irrepressible sniff, as she looked at the poor little presents and remembered that they didn't have mothers where the child lived. "Oh, I had my treat a longer him," said the boy, nodding toward Jerusalem and adding enthusiastically, "Wasn't that prime? It was real Christmassy a-settin' by the fire, eating lots and not bayin' hit." Here Mrs. Podgers broke down, and taking the boy in her arms, sobbed over him as if she had found her lost Neddy in this sad shape. The little lad regarded her demonstration with some uneasiness at first. But there is a magic about a genuine woman that wins its way everywhere, and soon the outcast nestled to her, feeling that this wonderful night was getting more Christmassy every minute. Mrs. Podgers was herself again directly, and seeing that the child's eyelids were heavy with weakness and weariness, she made him comfortable among the pillows and began to sing the lullaby that used to hush her little son to sleep. Mr. Jerusalem took something from his drawer and was stealing away, when the child opened his eyes and started up, calling out as he nodded, till the tassel danced on his preposterous cap. "I say, good night, good night." Looking much gratified, Mr. Jerusalem returned, shook the little hand extended to him, kissed the grateful face, and went away to sit on the stairs with tear after tear dropping off the end of his nose as he listened to the voice that, after 2 years of silence, sung the air this simple soul thought the loveliest in the world. At first it was more sob than song, but soon the soothing music flowed on unbroken, and the wondering child, for the first time within his memory, fell asleep in the sweet shelter of a woman's arms. When Mrs. Podgers came out, she found Mr. Jerusalem intent on stuffing another parcel into a long gray stocking already full to overflowing. "For the little chap, mum." He let fall that he'd never done this sort of thing in his life, and as he hadn't any stockings of his own, poor dear, I took the liberty of lending him one of mine, explained Mr. Jerusalem, surveying the knobby article with evident regret that it wasn't bigger. Mrs. Podgers said nothing, but looked from the stocking to the fatherly old gentleman who held it, and if Mrs. Podgers had obeyed the impulse of her heart, she would have forgotten decorum and kissed him on the spot. She didn't, however, but went briskly into her own room, whence she presently returned with red eyes and a pile of small garments in her hands. Having nearly exhausted his pincushion in trying to suspend the heavy stocking, Mr. Jerusalem had just succeeded as she appeared. He saw what she carried, watched her arrange the little shirt, jacket, and trousers, the half-worn shoes and tidy socks, beside the bed, with motherly care, with an expression which caused Mr. Jerusalem to dart downstairs and compose himself by rubbing his hair erect, and shaking his fist in the painted face of the late Podgers. An hour or two later the store was closed, the room cleared, Mrs. Podgers in her armchair on one side of the hearth with her knitting in her hand, Mr. Jerusalem in his armchair on the other side with his newspaper on his knee, both looking so cozy and comfortable that anyone would have pronounced them a contented couple on the spot. Ah, but they weren't, you see, and that spoilt the illusion, to one party at least. Both were rather silent, both looked thoughtfully at the fire, and the fire gave them both excellent counsel, as it seldom fails to do when it finds any kindred warmth and brightness in the hearts and souls of those who study it. Mrs. Podgers kindled first and broke out suddenly with a nod of great determination. "Jerusalem, I'm going to keep that boy if it's possible." "You shall, mum, whether it's possible or not," he answered, nodding back at her with equal wisdom. "I don't know why I never thought of such a thing before. There's a many children suffering for mothers, and heaven knows I'm wearying for some little child to fill my Neddy's place. I wonder if you didn't think of this when you took that boy in. It would be just like you." Mr. Jerusalem shook his head but looked so guilty that Mrs. Podgers was satisfied, called him a thoughtful dear within herself, and kindled still more. "Between you and Joe and the teapot, I've got another idea into my stupid head, and I know you won't laugh at it. That loving little soul has tried to get a tree for some poor babies who have no one to think of them but him, and even remembered the old one, who must be a wretch to hit that child and hit hard, too. I know by the looks of his arms. Well, I've a great longing to go and give him a tree, a right good one, like those Nettie used to have. To get in the little fellers he tells of, give them a good dinner, and then a regular Christmas party. Can it be done? Nothing could be easier, Mum, and Mr. Rusalem, who had been taking counsel with the fire till he quite glowed with warmth and emotion, nodded, smiled, and rubbed his hands, as if Mrs. Podgers had invited him to a Lord Mayor's feast or some equally gorgeous jollification. I suppose it's the day, and thinking of how it came to be, that makes me feel as if I wanted to help everybody, and makes this Christmas so bright and happy that I never can forget it," continued the good woman with a heartiness that made her honest face quite beautiful to behold. If Mrs. Podgers had only known what was going on under the capacious waistcoat opposite, she would have held her tongue, for the more charitable, earnest, and tender-hearted she grew, the harder it became for Mr. Rusalem to restrain the declaration which had been hovering on his lips ever since old Podgers died. As the comely woman sat there talking in that genial way and glowing with goodwill to all mankind, it was too much for Mr. Rusalem, and finding it impossible to resist the desire to know his fate, he yielded to it, gave a portentous hem, and said abruptly, "Well, Mum, have I done it?" "Done what?" asked Mrs. P., going on with her work. "Made you uncomfortable according to promise." "Oh dear, no, you've made me very happy and will have to try again," she answered, laughing. "I will, Mum." As he spoke, Mr. Rusalem drew his chair nearer, leaned forward, and looking straight at her, said deliberately, though his voice shook a little, "Mrs. Podgers, I love you hearty. Would you have any objections to marrying me?" Not a word said Mrs. Podgers, but her knitting dropped out of her hand, and she looked as uncomfortable as she could desire. "I thought that would do it," muttered Mr. Rusalem, but went on steadily, though his ruddy face got paler and paler, his voice huskier and huskier, and his heart fuller and fuller every word he attempted. "You see, Mum, I have took the liberty of loving you ever since you came, more than 10 years ago. I was eager to make it known long before this, but Mr. Podgers spoke first, and then it was no use. It come hard for a time, but I learned to give you up, though I couldn't learn not to love you, being as it was impossible. Since Podgers died, I've turned it over in my mind frequent, but felt as if I was too old and rough and poor in every way to ask so much. Lately, the wish has growed too strong for me, and tonight it won't be put down. If you want a trial, Mum, I should be that I'll warrant, for do my best, I could never be all I'm wishful of being for your sake. Would you give it name, and if not agreeable, we'll let it drop, Mum, we'll let it drop." If it hadn't been for the teapot, Mrs. Podgers would have said yes at once. The word was on her lips, but as she looked up, the fire flashed brightly on the teapot, which always occupied the place of honor on the sideboard, for Mrs. P. was intensely proud of it, and she stopped to think, for it reminded her of something. In order to explain this, we must keep Mr. Rusalem waiting for his answer a minute. Rather more than 10 years ago, old Podgers happened to want a housekeeper, and invited a poor woman to fill that post in his bachelor establishment. He never would have thought of marrying her, though the young woman was both notable and handsome, if he hadn't discovered that his partner loved her. Whereupon, the perverse old fellow immediately proposed, lest he should lose his housekeeper, and was accepted from motives of gratitude. Mrs. Podgers was a dutiful wife, but not a very happy one, for the world said that Mr. P. was a hard, miserly man, and his wife was forced to believe the world in the right, till the teapot changed her opinion. There happened to be much suffering among the poor one year, owing to the burning of the mill, and contributions were solicited for their relief. Old Podgers, though a rich man, refused to give a penny, but it was afterwards discovered that his private charities exceeded many more ostentatious ones, and the word miserly was changed to peculiar. When times grew prosperous again, the workmen, whose families had been so quietly served, clubbed together, got the teapot and left it at Mr. Podger's door one Christmas Eve. But the old gentleman never saw it, for sudden apoplexy struck and took him off that very afternoon. In the midst of her grief, Mrs. Podgers was surprised, touched, and troubled by this revelation, for she had known nothing of the affair till the teapot came. Womanlike, she felt great remorse for what now seemed like blindness and ingratitude. She fancied she owed him some atonement, and remembering how often he had expressed a hope that she wouldn't marry again after he was gone, she resolved to gratify him. The buxom widow had had many opportunities of putting off her widow's clothes, but she had refused all offers without regret till now. The teapot reminded her of Podgers and her vow, and though her heart rebelled, she thought it her duty to check the answer that sprung to her lips, and slowly but decidedly replied, "I'm truly grateful to you, Rusalem, but I couldn't do it. Don't think you'd ever be a trial, for you're the last man to be that to any woman. It's a feeling I have that it wouldn't be kind to Podgers. I can't forget how much I owe him, how much I wronged him, and how much I can please him by staying as I am, for his frequent words were, 'Keep the property together and don't marry Jane.' 'Very well, mum, then we'll let it drop and fall back into the old ways. Don't fret yourself about it. I shall bear up.' And there Mr. Rusalem's voice gave out, and he sat frowning at the fire, bent on bearing up manfully, though it was very hard to find that Podgers dead as well as Podgers living was to keep from him the happiness he had waited for so long. His altered face and broken voice were almost too much for Mrs. P., and she found it necessary to confirm her resolution by telling it. Laying one hand on his shoulder, she pointed to the teapot with the other, saying gently, "The day that came and I found out how good he was, too late to beg his pardon and love him for it, I said to myself, I'll be true to Podgers till I die, because that's all I can do now to show my repentance and respect. But for that feeling and that promise, I couldn't say no to you, Rusalem, for you've been my best friend all these years, and I'll be yours all my life, though I can't be anything else, my dear." For the first time since its arrival, the mention of the teapot did not produce the accustomed demonstration from Mr. Rusalem. On the contrary, he looked at it with a momentary expression of indignation and disgust, strongly suggestive of an insane desire to cast the precious relic on the floor and trample on it. If any such temptation did assail him, he promptly curbed it and looked about the room with a forlorn air that made Mrs. Podgers hate herself, as he meekly answered, "I'm obliged to you, mum. The feeling does you honor. Don't mind me. It's rather a blow, but I'll be up again directly." He retired behind his paper as he spoke, and Mrs. Podgers spoilt her knitting in respectful silence, till Mr. Rusalem began to read aloud as usual, to assure her that, in spite of the blow, he was up again. In the gray dawn, the worthy gentleman was roused from his slumbers by a strange voice whispering shrilly in his ear, "I say, there's two of 'em. Ain't it jolly?" Starting up, he beheld a comical little goblin standing at his bedside with a rapturous expression of countenance and a pair of long gray stockings in its hands. Both were heaping full, but one was evidently meant for Mr. Rusalem, for every wish, whim, and fancy of his had been guessed and gratified in a way that touched him to the heart. If it were not indecorous to invade the privacy of a gentleman's apartment, I could describe how there were two boys in the big bed that morning, how the old boy reveled in the treasures of his stocking as heartily as the young one, how they laughed and exclaimed, pulled each other's nightcaps off, and had a regular pillow fight, how little Joe was dressed into his new clothes and strutted like a small peacock in them, how Mr. Rusalem made himself splendid in his Sunday best, and spent 10 good minutes in tying the fine cravat somebody had hemmed for him. But lest it should be thought improper, I will merely say that nowhere in the city did the sun shine on happier faces than these two showed Mrs. Podgers, as Mr. Jerusalem came in with Joe on his shoulder, both wishing her a Merry Christmas as heartily as if this were the first the world had ever seen. Mrs. Podgers was as brisk and blithe as they, though she must have sat up one half the night making presents for them and laid awake the other half making plans for the day. As soon as she had hugged Joe, toasted him red, and heaped his plate with everything on the table, she told them the order of her schedule. As soon as ever you can't eat any more, you must order home the tree, Jerusalem, and then go with Joe to invite the party, while I see to dinner and dress up the pine as well as I can in such a hurry. Yes, mum, answered Mr. Jerusalem with alacrity, though how she was going to do her part was not clear to him. But he believed her capable of working any miracle within the power of mortal woman, and having plans of his own, he soon trudged away with Joe prancing at his side, so like the lost Neddy in the little cap and coat, that Mrs. Podgers forgot her party to stand watching them down the crowded street, with eyes that saw very dimly when they looked away again. Never mind how she did it, the miracle was wrought, for Mrs. Podgers and her maid Betsy fell to work with a will, and when women set their hearts on anything, it is a known fact that they seldom fail to accomplish it. By noon, everything was ready, the tree waiting in the best parlor, the dinner smoking on the table, and Mrs. Podgers at the window to catch the first glimpse of her coming guests. A last thought struck her as she stood waiting. There was but one high chair in the house, and the big ones would be doubtless too low for the little people. Bent on making them as comfortable as her motherly heart could desire, she set about mending the matter by bringing out from Podgers' bookcase several fat old ledgers and arranging them in the chairs. While busily dusting one of these, it slipped from her hands, and as it fell, a paper fluttered from among the leaves. She picked it up, looked at it, dropped her duster, and became absorbed. It was a small sheet filled with figures, and here and there short memoranda, not an interesting-looking document in the least, but Mrs. Podgers stood like a statue till she had read it several times. Then she caught her breath, clapped her hands, laughed and cried together, and put the climax to her extraordinary behavior by running across the room and embracing the astonished little teapot. How long she would have gone on in this wild manner it is impossible to say, had not the jingle of bells and a shrill, small cheer announced that the party had arrived. Whisking the mysterious paper into her pocket and dressing her agitated countenance in smiles, she hastened to open the door before chilly fingers could find the bell. Such a merry load as that was! Such happy faces looking out from under the faded hoods and caps! Such a hearty hurrah for Mrs. Podgers! Greeted her straight from the grateful hearts that loved her the instant she appeared. And what a perfect Santa Claus Mr. Jerusalem made, with his sleigh full of bundles as well as children, his face full of sunshine, his arms full of babies whom he held up that they too might clap their little hands while he hurrahed with all his might. Even reindeers, or the immemorial white beard and fur cap of Mr. Claus, could not have improved the picture. It was good to see Mrs. Podgers welcome them all in a way that gave the shyest courage, made the poorest forget patched jackets or ragged gowns, and caused them all to feel that this indeed was a Merry Christmas. It was better still to see Mrs. Podgers preside over the table, dealing out turkey and pudding with such a bounteous hand that the small feasters often paused, in sheer astonishment, at the abundance before them, and then fell to eating again with renewed energy, as if they feared to wake up presently and find the whole meal a dream. It was best of all to see Mrs. Podgers gather them about her afterwards, hearing their little stories, learning their many wants, and winning their young hearts by such gentle wiles that they soon regarded her as some beautiful, benignant fairy, who had led them from a cold, dark world into the land of innocent delights they had imagined, longed for, yet never hoped to find. Then came the tree, hung thick with bonbons, fruit and toys, gay mittens and tippets, comfortable socks and hoods, and lower down, more substantial but less showy gifts. For Mrs. Podgers had nearly exhausted the Dorcas basket that fortunately chanced to be with her just then. There was no time for candles, but, as if he understood the matter and was bent on supplying all deficiencies, the sun shone gloriously on the little tree and made it doubly splendid in the children's eyes. It would have touched the hardest heart to watch the children, as they trooped in and stood about the wonderful tree. Some seemed ready to go wild with delight. Some folded their hands and sighed with solemn satisfaction. Others looked as if bewildered by such unwanted and unexpected good fortune. And when Mr. Jerusalem told them how this fruitful tree had sprung up from their loving playmate's broken bough, little Joe hid his face in Mrs. Podgers' gown and could find no vent for his great happiness but tears. It was not a large tree, but it took a long while to strip it, and even when the last gilded nut was gone, the children still lingered about it, as if they regarded it with affection as a generous benefactor and were loath to leave it. Next they had a splendid round of games. I don't know what will be thought of the worthy souls, but Mr. Jerusalem and Mrs. Podgers played with all their might. Perhaps the reason why he gave himself up so freely to the spirit of the hour was that his disappointment was very heavy, and according to his simple philosophy, it was wiser to soothe his wounded heart and cheer his sad spirit with the sweet society of little children than to curse fate and reproach a woman. What was Mrs. Podgers' reason it is impossible to tell, but she behaved as if some secret satisfaction filled her heart so full that she was glad to let it bubble over in this harmless fashion. Both tried to be children again, and both succeeded capitally, though now and then their hearts got the better of them. Mr. Jerusalem tossed all the little lads up to the ceiling and caught them. He kissed all the little girls, and, that no one might feel slighted, kissed Mrs. Podgers also. When they played Open the Gates, and the two grown people stood hand in hand while the mirthful troops marched under the tall arch, Mrs. Podgers never once looked Mr. Jerusalem in the face, but blushed and kept her eyes on the ground, as if she was a bashful girl playing games with some boyish sweetheart. The children saw nothing of all this, and blessed their innocent little hearts. They wouldn't have understood it if they had. But it was perfectly evident that the gray-headed gentleman and the mature matron had forgotten all about their years and were in their teens again, for true love is gifted with immortal youth. When weary with romping, they gathered round the fire, and Mr. Jerusalem told fairy tales, as if his dull ledgers had preserved these childish romances like flowers between their leaves and kept them fresh in spite of time. Mrs. Podgers sung to them and made them sing with her, till passers-by smiled and lingered as the childish voices reached them. Looking through the screen of roses, they caught glimpses of the happy little group singing in the ruddy circle of that Christmas fire. It was a very humble festival, but with these poor guests came also love and charity, innocence and joy, the strong, sweet virtues that bless and beautify the world. And though eclipsed by many more splendid celebrations, I think the day was better and the blither for Mrs. Podgers' little party. When it was all over, the grateful farewells and riotous cheers as the children were carried home, the twilight raptures of Joe, and the long lullaby before he could extinguish himself enough to go to sleep, the congratulations and clearing up, then Mr. Jerusalem and Mrs. Podgers sat down to tea. But no sooner were they alone together than Mrs. P. fell into a curious flutter and did the oddest things. She gave Mr. Jerusalem warm water instead of tea, passed the salt bowl when he asked for the sugar basin, burnt her fingers, laid her handkerchief on the tray, tried to put her fork in her pocket, and went on in such a way that Mr. Jerusalem began to fear the day had been too much for her. "You're tired, Mum," he said presently, hearing her sigh. "Not a bit," she answered briskly, opening the teapot to add more water, but, seeming to forget her purpose, sat looking into its steamy depths as if in search of something. If it was courage, she certainly found it, for all of a sudden she handed the mysterious paper to Mr. Jerusalem, saying solemnly, "Read that and tell me if it's true." He took it readily, put on his glasses, and bent to examine it, but gave a start that caused the spectacles to fly off his nose as he exclaimed, "Lord bless me, he said he'd burnt it. Then it is true, don't deny it, Jerusalem, it's no use, for I've caught you at last." And in her excitement Mrs. Podgers slapped down the teapot lid as if she had got him inside. "I assure you, mum, he promised to burn it. He made me write down the sums and so on to satisfy him that I hadn't took more'n my share of the profits. It was my own, and though he called me a fool, he let me do as I liked, but I never thought it would come up again like this, mum. Of course you didn't, for it was left in one of the old ledgers we had down for the dears to sit on. I found it, read it, and understood it in a minute. It was you who helped the mill people, and then hid behind Podgers because you didn't want to be thanked. When he died and the teapot came, you saw how proud I was of it, how I took comfort in thinking he did the kind things. And for my sake you never told the truth, not even last night, when a word would have done so much. Oh, Jerusalem, how could you deceive me all these years?" If Mr. Jerusalem had desired to answer, he would have had no chance, for Mrs. Podgers was too much in earnest to let anyone speak but herself, and hurried on, fearing that her emotion would get the better of her before she had had her say. "It was like you, but it wasn't right, for you've robbed yourself of the love and honor that was your due. You've let people praise Podgers when he didn't deserve it. You've seen me take pride in this because I thought he'd earned it. And you've only laughed at it all as if it was a fine joke to do generous things and never take the credit of 'em. Now I know what bank you've laid up your hard earnings in, and what a blessed interest you'll get by and by. Truly they who give to the poor lend to the Lord, and you don't need to have the good words written on silver, for you keep 'em always in your heart." Mrs. Podgers stopped a minute for breath and felt that she was going very fast, for Jerusalem sat looking at her with so much humility, love, and longing in his honest face that she knew it would be all up with her directly. "You saw how I grieved for Neddy and gave me this motherless boy to fill his place. You knew I wanted someone to make the house seem like home again, and you offered me the lovingest heart that ever was. You found I wasn't satisfied to lead such a selfish life, and you showed me how beautiful charity could make it. You taught me to find duty waiting for me at my own door, and putting by your own trouble, you've helped to make this day the happiest Christmas of my life." If it hadn't been for the teapot, Mrs. Podgers would have given out here, but her hand was still on it, and something in the touch gave her steadiness for one more burst. "I loved the little teapot for Podgers' sake. Now I love it 100 times more for yours, because you've brought its lesson home to me in a way I never can forget, and have been my benefactor as well as theirs, who shall soon know you as well as I do. Jerusalem, there's only one way in which I can thank you for all this, and I do it with my whole heart. Last night you asked me for something, and I thought I couldn't give it to you. Now I'm sure I can, and if you still want it, why, Mrs. Podgers never finished that sentence, for, with an impetuosity surprising in one of his age and figure, Mr. Jerusalem sprang out of his chair and took her in his arms, saying tenderly in a voice almost inaudible between a conflicting choke and chuckle, my dear, God bless you."